Más o menos. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us throughout the festival. It's Saturday. After 2 or 3 days of drinking, I'm sure we're very tired this morning. My name is Jenny Choi. I'm from the News Integrity Initiative. We are a grant-making initiative and a global coalition of academics, journalists, and researchers to build trust between newsrooms and communities. We are housed at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, and this panel is featuring one of our grant-making initiatives called Finding Common Ground, which the Agora Journalism Center out of the University of Oregon launched, which is a, I think 7 newsrooms were awarded about 10,000 euros to experiment with community trust building projects. And basically this cohort started here in Perugia at the International Journalism Festival to share best practices. So everyone now is, I think, very close, maybe closer than their own family and friends. So I wanted to briefly introduce, so 3 of the 7 projects will be featured today, and I believe this is the last panel. Some of you may have seen other Finding Common Ground panels to introduce these projects, but the whole point of sharing these stories is to not only brainstorm best strategies to build trust and to incentivize your newsrooms to build trust with concrete and practical approaches, but also to show the business case. We're talking a lot these days about misinformation, how do you create revenue models for combating misinformation and strengthening the brand of why journalists need to be trusted for a healthier discourse. So these 3 projects are very unique in the sense that they have begun in-person engagements as an outgrowth of their high-quality journalism to build that trust and take it to the next step with audiences and communities. The other interesting aspect of these projects is that there are very creative art forms. Bless you. And so we'll talk a little bit more about it in our conversation. And we're trying to make this casual because this is a very intimate room. So if you have ideas or questions, please feel free to raise your hand or shout out, do whatever you need to do, how the spirit moves you. So our first presenter is Maeve Mcclanahan. She is, let me get my notes up. She's an award-winning investigative journalist at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. Maeve has previously produced investigations for BBC Radio, Guardian, BuzzFeed UK. She'll talk about her No Refuge tour, which is a very interesting theater project. Karolis, right here, Vyšňovskis, is a journalist at Nanook Multimedia, which covers social and cultural issues. He founded Nyla, which is a podcast series under Nanook. And he's going to talk a little bit about how he's incorporated the in-person live events out of his podcast. And finally, all the way at the end, is Gregg Mano. He's an assistant professor of newspaper and online journalism at the Newhouse School of Syracuse University and the faculty director of The Stand, which is a community newspaper written for and by the residents of a diverse neighborhood in Syracuse, New York, known as the South Side. And he's going to talk about an interesting photojournalism project called South Side Photo Walk. So without further ado, Maeve, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your project.
Sure.
Award-winning and money-winning project.
Sure. Thanks. What an introduction. Thanks, Jenny. So, great. So, yes, thank you so much for having me. So, my name is Maeve. I work at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, which is a not-for-profit unit in the UK that does long-term investigations in the public interest and then gives them away, partners up with other established media organisations. And community engagement now forms an integral part of what we do, because a year ago, almost to the day, we launched a new project called Bureau Local. And the essence of that was, well, it was inspired by the fact that we believe local journalism is crucial in holding power to account, but that more and more, especially in the UK, time pressures, funding pressures, mean that local journalists are really squeezed in what they can do. Some of, you know, my colleague used to work at a local paper outside London, and he was being asked to write 5 stories a day. And if you're writing 5 stories a day, you just don't have time to do anything other than copying and pasting and maybe make a quick phone call. You can't do deep investigation. You can't hold power to account in the way you might want to as an investigative journalist. So we created the Bureau Local, which is kind of built on the model of the ICIJ, who do the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers. The concept being that if we all work together in a collaborative, engaged manner, we can be bigger than the sum of our parts, and we can each break stories relevant to our local area that are scoops in themselves, but by doing a kind of fraction of the work because we've all put in together, which is kind of antithetical to the way investigative journalists often think. We want to break the story, we want to make sure we're not scooped, we certainly think that, you know, that we can go it alone. So it was a bit of a risk. We didn't know if people were going to be into this. But like I say, we're 1 year in. We have 680 members across the UK now. Many of those local journalists, some of those hyper-local bloggers, concerned citizens, journalism students, people that just want to get involved and kind of dig into an investigation. And we've broken some really big stories that have both national and incredible local impact. And so I want to talk you through one of those today, which we are now planning, thanks to the Common Ground Fund, to develop in a kind of new community direction. And it's called No Refuge. So the story started when this headline caught our attention back in January last year. And it was a story about Sunderland, which is a city in the north of England, where the council said they were going to cut funding for domestic violence refuges in the city. And all the refuge managers there said, well, then we simply are going to have to shut down. And that means women and children fleeing domestic violence are going to have nowhere to go in Sunderland. And we thought, if that's happening there, what's happening across the rest of the country? And funding in the UK for domestic violence refuges is council-based. So 350 or so councils, each with different potential stories going on. No one had a clear idea of what was happening across the whole picture. And then at the same time, or rather a little later, once we'd been digging into it for a few months, a friend drew my attention to this Facebook post, which was a woman who was living in a refuge in Kensington and Chelsea, which is the richest borough in the UK. It's where Notting Hill is. It's where, you know, all of the prime ministers live and MPs live. And amongst all of this wealth and luxury, she was staying in a refuge where there were rats, there were leaks. They've been complaining for weeks and weeks about the state of the place. And then one night in July, the roof of the refuge fell in on them, and a lot of the women who had managed to just scrabble a few meagre possessions as they fled their homes found their things destroyed by rainwater tumbling through the roof. So I knew I wanted to talk to this woman. I knew I wanted to engage an entire community of our journalists to dig into what was happening in their regions. So we put a call out. 20 journalists came on board, and we worked together for about 3 months. We did a whole raft of Freedom of Information Act requests to all of those councils, and we shared that information with our local journalist network. We asked them to use a survey to go and talk to refuge managers, and they went and kind of did their own digging in their local area. And we all kind of fed back to each other what we were doing. And they produced some incredible stories. Here, the Yorkshire Post did a series of stories about what was happening in Yorkshire. Here in London, there's more like really beautiful, deep features rather than just kind of cutting and pasting a press release, which we could have press released our findings. Instead, they had talked to people, they had incredible case studies. And because, this is the Lancashire Post who put it on their front page, because we had all of these individual local journalists working on their local stories, they each went to their local member of parliament and said, hey, I've heard this thing's happening in Hackney, or I've heard this thing's happening in Leeds, what have you got to say about it? Which meant that then 12 MPs came out and called for change, whereas if I was just doing a national story, I would have just spoken to one person. So they produced 55 beautiful stories like that across the country, and we all published on one day. Since then, we've done about another 30 stories together on similar topics. We produced 17 national stories for TV, for press. We have all these MPs calling for change. There was a debate in Parliament because of it. The government opened a public consultation on how refuges should be funded 2 weeks after these stories came out. And we basically revealed that funding had been cut by a quarter and that thousands of women were being turned away from refuges because there just wasn't the resources to support them. But along this route, I've been following the case of that woman from the Facebook post for 3 months as she was moved to different areas, to council flats where the walls were smeared with feces, to bed and breakfasts where people could kind of come and go as they pleased, to, you know, having kind of almost a nervous breakdown because of the stress of the events. And we got to know each other quite well, and it turned out that she's an incredible writer. She wrote a beautiful first-person piece for our website, and she's just an incredibly talented woman. And she was also doing stand-up comedy, which you wouldn't think you would do while you were also experiencing domestic violence, but she's a fighter. And she is now, inspired by what happened to her, written a one-woman fictionalized show called The Refuge Woman, which is kind of about life in a refuge. And so we've decided to tour that show, thanks to the Common Ground funding, to 8 of the cities where our local reporters did their investigations. And we're going to put on the show in small theatres or community centres or other spaces. We're going to invite the local politicians and councillors, the NGOs and refuge managers that work in this area and the real experts. She's going to do her show. Then our local journalist who worked in that area is going to stand up afterwards and say, that's a lovely fictionalised telling of it, but here's what's happening in Carlisle, or here's what's happening in Birmingham. And then we'll have a debate with the local politicians and the refuge managers, and hopefully it's a creative, safe space where we can kind of get this story to people in a different way. If they didn't read the paper that day, they happen to miss it, they can come and experience it in a completely different manner. So hopefully that's a whiz through of what we're doing.
I'm actually going to follow up with a couple questions, if you don't mind. I would love to hear the story of, well, first of all, how did your newsroom pivot to a local strategy? Mm-hmm. And secondly, what are some of how did you champion this work? Because I'm sure it wasn't something that your newsroom was used to engaging in. So I'm very interested in the back story mm-hmm. of all the tears and fist fights that you had.
Sure. So our editor, Rachel Oldroyd, is something of a visionary in that the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in itself is quite an unusual model, this kind of independent unit that we're just allowed to run at stories for 6 months, a year, if they need them. And I think she was really looking around. We've done things on drone strikes in the Middle East. We've done things on we're doing things on antibiotic resistance across the world. But she was surveying the kind of the UK side of things and what needs to happen next. And there has just been story after story about papers closing, about papers being whittled down to, skeleton staff. And people are still doing incredible work. I want to say we're not kind of replacing any of this system. What we decided to do was instead try and find a way to bolster what was already being done and give people that really, really want to do this kind of work an opportunity. If they can, some of these local journalists, they do it in their evenings because they're so desperate to kind of get these stories out, but they're trying to write 5 stories a day. They'll do it in their evenings, or people that will do it in their lunch break, or they will show the kind of the stories that you can get to their editors and say, look, when we do investigative journalism, it really makes an impact. So it kind of came from that, and it quite literally inspired by the ICIJ model of if people can work together and we can collaborate, we can break something bigger. And then quite fortunately, one of our advisors is a guy called Joaquin Alvarado, who is from, he was at the Center for Investigative Reporting in the US, and they had developed a project called Storyworks. And they do Reveal, the podcast, which is an amazing podcast. And so they started to develop some of their actual journalism into theatrical works themselves. So I was kind of aware of that, and I was bubbling away. And then Cash Carraway, who I got to know, said, I'm writing this play. And a kind of light went on in my head where I said, oh, hang on, we know that they do that, and we know that we like what they do. So actually it wasn't as hard a battle as you would imagine in the office. They were quite up for it.
And just one more follow-up question. In terms of, I love that you frame collaboration to address infrastructural capacity. I find that I hear a lot of newsrooms saying that they don't want collaboration because it takes too much effort. So what are some key takeaways in terms of advice that you can give for people who are kind of dipping into that?
Yeah, I mean, it does take effort. The Bureau local team are 5 people now, and one of them, a relatively new role, is specifically a community organizer, because we realize with 680 local journalists in our network, we need somebody whose job is literally to check in with them and make sure that they have what they need and listen to their requests. So it does take work, but I would say those 5 of us that are those journalists, we've produced, I think, 200 local stories and probably 50 more national stories in this year. The 5 of us working alone couldn't have done all that. So in terms of, return on your investment, I would say, yeah, it's about that. It's about kind of long-term thinking, and then creating structures by which you kind of have things like, we use Slack just to talk to each other. We use bulletins. We try and do face-to-face kind of hack days and events where we can actually meet people and get to know them. So it's about kind of thinking creatively that way.
Go girl. All right, so next is Carlos, who's already kind of dipped his toe in the live in-person event space. So Carlos, take it away. Are you going to sing first?
That would be good.
Okay.
No, you wouldn't like to hear it. First of all, thank you, Maeve. It's really exciting project that you're doing, and I'm happy that we at Common Ground can know each other now. Now the journalists participating in it. So now I want to take you to Lithuania, a country in the Baltic states in Europe, and here we are a multimedia agency called Nanook. And I will give you some background, so then you will see where we are coming from. Because Lithuanian media landscape it's a small country. It's less than 3 million residents, and so there are a few major media institutions in the country. But none of us really liked any of those, and we decided that instead of being just freelancers, we would rather unite together and create something that we would like to, that we want from journalism. So we want social conscious journalism, we want journalism with strong visual storytelling and long form storytelling in general. So first projects by Nanook were a project called Monotone Days that talked about situation in women's prison in Lithuania. It was made by my colleague Berta Tilmantaitė. She's here with us, so I'm happy that she's here. Another project was about Lithuanian Paralympian team. Now we just launched a project about Russian refugees living in Lithuania, because apparently there are a lot of people who basically cannot live in today's Russia because of their political views, and Lithuania is a country that can provide shelter to them, and this is kind of unknown story even in our own country, so we just revealed it and published now. I previously worked in the national radio, and I always loved podcasts. I just love the format, and I still do it. And all journalists in our team, we really listen to mostly American podcast shows, like produced by NPR and other news providers. So we thought, why don't we do it in Lithuanian language? And we launched our first professional podcast in Lithuania. It's called Naila. I feel like I also have to explain the name here, because it can be strange for people coming from, let's say, Northern America, just to see that we are in the Baltics have a name Nanook, and Naila is also not, has this northern feel to it. So basically, we just want to give a respect to the film Nanook of the North, which was the first documentary film even though it was quite fictional in terms of history, but still. So we want to provide a new kind of documentary journalism in Lithuania. So we thought we'll take the name. Also, we like how it sounds, and yeah, so that's maybe the right reason. Yeah. So every Tuesday we produce a new episode. Mostly we focus on culture and social issues. It's a broad variety of topics. For example, here's the picture when we did a story on Roma people living in Lithuania, because they are the most stigmatized community in the country, even though they've been living there for a lot of years. So we talked with the new generation of Roma people in Lithuania, and wanted to find out how do they see their future. Do they want to stay in the country? If not, what will they do? This is a picture from episode where we did a story on Muslims living in Lithuania. It's also a small community, but they get a lot of stigmatization from events that can happen in other countries, even though the Lithuanian Muslims have nothing to do with them.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Karolis, I love this photo. How did you get this family to invite you inside their home? Because look at you are very different from them. So I'm just curious.
We are, yes. Yeah. So this is a Syrian family living in Kaunas, the next biggest city in Lithuania. Basically, we just got our colleagues from Red Cross in Lithuania. They kind of introduced us to each other, and because other journalists in the Nuuk team, they already had a good reputation. Like when I joined them, I was really proud of myself as a journalist to be in this team. So since people themselves don't really trust mainstream media in Lithuania, so when we see that we're doing something independent, they kind of give us credit. And our role then is not to spoil that trust. So we hope that we did. So yeah, we just spent time with them and with their young family, trying to make their home in Lithuania. Yeah, and one more story that I want to share is about sexual harassment case. Basically, with our podcast, we managed to break the first Me Too story in Lithuania. We got one art director working with the most famous Lithuanian film director, and she to tell her story about how she was harassed by him, and then was another actress who also gave an inclusive interview for us. So basically we published their stories as a podcast episode, and they also trusted us instead of mainstream media, because they knew that we won't kind of they present their stories in the right way, and that story went international. Like Hollywood Reporter covered it, French media covered it, because that director is famous in France. So then we felt like we can actually, even being from a small country and a really just small collective of people, can do big things. And how do we fund it? I want to say that community building is not about the people that we interview and share their stories. We also want to build community in terms of our listeners, because we launched a Patreon campaign. Didn't really expect anything, and now since September we have like 180 paid patrons now, and with more than $1,000 per month to do our job. Of course, it's not enough. We need private sponsors, we need NGO partners, we need funds like Common Ground Fund, but we're really happy that it is actually happening, because the new generation of like Lithuanian readers, they weren't used to the idea of paying for content at all, and our listeners are mostly like people our age. We did one episode where we were interviewing them, so here are some pictures of them. Yes, and now I want to move to our newest project. It's called Nyla Live, and here's some context for that. Lithuania is a country that doesn't really have a history in debating, like in public debates, because if you look at the Soviet history of Lithuania, all the political debates, they were happening like in the kitchen privately, but not in the public spaces. And now we see that we don't have this culture. And when Facebook started in the world, in Lithuania, it got so huge. Like everyone is on Facebook in Lithuania. Even like my grandfather is in Lithuania and using it on Facebook, yeah, and he's using it because people needed a place where they can debate things. But the problem with Facebook is that instead of actually going for solutions, you just go to your local like tribes, and you don't really reach. The society is really divided in the sense, and we thought that no, even though we produce content on the internet, it's not. We must go one step further and present it and actually meet each other with live events. We were inspired by Guardian live events that they did a lot of like panels on big interesting topics where they invite people and they would invite the audience to ask questions as well. So we did the first event in Vilnius University. It was connected with Lithuania's as a country celebration of 100 years of Lithuania's independence, but there were a lot of like really cheerful events in the country, and of course it's a big event and we are happy about it as well, but there's a lot of history from that time that was untold. And one thing that got really curious for us is about women's movement in Lithuania 100 years ago, because Lithuania was one of the first countries in Europe that women got a right to vote. But when you look at the history of a country in terms of how many politicians, how many influential intellectuals were women, the number just went down, and we wanted to find out what happened. So we did debate on that, and yeah, I think it was quite successful. We wanted just to present a different kind of culture of talking in Lithuania. And we recorded the event and we published it as a podcast. So with the help of Common Ground, we want to continue that. We want to continue that this year and the next year. And there's a lot of topics to discuss in Lithuanian society, because a lot of conversations that are happening in the Western world or are already solved are still the issues in Lithuanian society. For example, now, again, we have some politicians, and now quite... unfortunately, they are quite big amount of them who want to deny women's right to abortion. Or, for example, there's a lot of social and income inequality in Lithuania after joining the European Union and after the Euro. Also, there's a lot of strict, for example, drugs policy. You can get caught smoking weed, and you can actually go to jail for that, which is just it shouldn't be like this when you look at the other countries. But the laws must change. But the debate is only on internet, and people don't meet each other. So we want to talk that. We want to talk about mental health. We want to talk about LGBT rights. But the important thing is just to look each other in the eyes and do that. So we want to provide the space for that. We just started, but yeah, so far we had only one event, but we want to make it a continuous place where people know that, okay, we have to gather there, we talk to each other, and the podcast is a way to bring that conversation to those who cannot participate, to those who are not living in Lithuania. There are almost 1 million Lithuanians who are not living in Lithuania. They don't want to lose a connection of what's happening. They don't want to forget the language and don't want to forget the issues that are there. So we believe that we want to provide that, and we believe that's the mission of journalism. So, yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you. So, Carlos, you talked a little bit, and I'm going to pivot to Maeve. Gregg, can you maneuver from there, or we need to shuffle for you? Awesome. So you talked a little bit about creating safe spaces for talking, for people to talk to each other eye to eye. And that's and I'm going to actually ask Maeve to weigh in on this as well. Creating safe spaces, because Maeve, you mentioned this, is very volatile when we talk about trauma. And both of your projects, I feel like, have dealt with sources or folks who've experienced intense trauma. So creating safe spaces seems like a very daunting thing to do from a newsroom perspective. So let's start with you, Carlos. What does that mean, creating safe space by talking? Do you need additional training to make sure that your trauma survivors are also safe?
Basically, you learn it by doing. Of course, that's maybe not the best approach. I mean, I read before doing a story on sexual harassment. I did a lot of research of how do you actually do that, because especially if I'm because I also, we worked as a team, but I also interviewed some of our sources who are women, and I thought, like, maybe there's a problem that I'm doing that. But so I did my research on how you do that, and and then you just try to be as professional, as ethical as you are. So we don't really have much experience in that in Lithuania, and I guess in a lot of countries as well, but you just have to do your best, I think. And also one more thing, it's about creating safe spaces, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to invite people who have opposing views. That's one of the finding solution, that you have to invite people who think differently. It's just that we want to have a decent conversation instead of people like cursing at each other. But that is also, there's a lot of hate speech on like Lithuanian internet. We just want to move away from that.
Thank you. Maeve?
So we gave a lot of guidance to our community of journalists when they were doing this story as to ways to protect their sources. Things like making sure there wasn't any metadata in photos that they used of locations. Things about obviously changing names even when people said it's probably fine to use my name, to be hyper safe on that kind of things, and taking out identifying details. But with the events themselves, we're exploring the idea of taking the talk actually into refuge spaces itself. Whether that's appropriate in different situations, we're yet to see, but that could be, I think, one really strong way that women who are currently in danger could still kind of engage and take part in that. And then in the theatre and the community spaces, I think it's about framing right from the start the kind of space that you want. So because this is a kind of theatrical event with a talk on the end and then an opening up, it's less framed as a debate about come and argue the toss about this thing. It's more about like this is an opportunity to hear points of view and to share your experience if you feel comfortable doing that.
Fascinating. Okay, last but not least, our American friend, Gregg, from New York. Are you ready?
Thank you, everybody. Yes, good morning. Thanks for coming. It's my pleasure to present the Stand newspaper's South Side photo walk to you. It's in many ways a very simple project, maybe the simplest one among the Common Fund grantees. But I think it has a lot of power and is also probably relatively easily reproducible elsewhere. The Stand newspaper, let me use this, covers a community in Syracuse that doesn't get positive press coverage. It's only in the news when something goes wrong. And the residents really feel cheated by that their community has been given this black eye, when in fact crime is very widely distributed in the Syracuse area. It's a nice city. I don't want to give people the impression that it's not, but by some measures it's one of the poorest cities in America, and on this one particular census measure that measures concentrations of poverty and in relation to the neighborhoods adjacent to the poor neighborhoods, it's as segregated a city by class as we have in the country. So recognizing this, my mentor, Steve Davis, started a newspaper specifically to cover the Stand, to cover this community called The Stand in 2010, and hired a really brilliant woman named Ashley Kang to kind of run its day-to-day operations. And she's very much kind of this community, and that's been a huge asset in making everything that The Stand has done successful. We brought community members up to the Newhouse School. Newhouse is kind of up on the hill with a very kind of white, affluent student body. The South Side is kind of down in the valley, and we wanted to break those barriers and build some common ground with the community there. So the white guy in the background is Steve Davis, who's founded the newspaper, and he's training community members here to cover their own community, to be community correspondents. And it leads to stories that traditional newspapers probably would not cover. If you see this guy out on the corner, you might wonder what he's doing with a bunch of knives and a toy gun, and it seems kind of menacing and threatening, but he's actually encouraging people to turn in their weapons to him, and at the end of every day he takes them to the police department where they're destroyed. And why this story was being told, while he was being interviewed, a couple of people came up and turned in knives to him, which you can kind of see on the sidewalk there. That story would never appear in the mainstream newspaper in Syracuse. Training people to tell stories in a written form is quite difficult. And we were also looking for ways to demystify the neighborhood for people outside of the community. It was one of the things we heard from Southside residents was that the stand was wonderful in terms of kind of making them feel better about themselves, giving them a place where they can see themselves reflected in newsprint. It also has a digital component, but it was important to us that we had a printed free product to distribute as well. And so we came up with this idea of a photo walk, which is not an original idea. In fact, I think the first couple of years we might have piggybacked on a national event. But it ended up being a really effective mechanism for getting people that would never come into this community to come into this community. In many ways, it's a beautiful place. There's really old architecture. It has a lot of charms, but people just have this unnatural fear of it. But as part of a group, being escorted by people who are from the community, who obviously also take part in this, we were able to break some of those barriers down. And it really becomes a joyous occasion. People get silly and have a lot of fun with it. I'm gonna see if I can play this short video where I think will give you an idea of what I mean. Find my cursor.
Found it?
There.
So there's some. Oh, there it is. Become opportunity for people to get creative, to get silly, to explore a place where they haven't explored before, to meet people that they've never met before, and crucially, those interactions are going both ways at this event. And the photos are really quite striking, and people, they're not used to media attention, and they want it. They're, we give people training that if people don't want their photo taken, this is not a hardcore journalistic exercise where we're going to shove a camera in someone's face if they don't want it in their face. But most people are very happy to be photographed as part of this, and I think it's because they see community members as part of our group. I think that helps a lot. And again, they're not used to seeing people that have any interest in them whatsoever. So it makes for amazing content. It helps build neighborhood identity and pride. And we're able to distribute these images even more broadly than we normally would with the stand. And of course, it makes great content for us. Filling the stand with content is always a challenge every month. And so I'll just flip through some of the pages that we've been able to produce over the years as a result of this project. So one of the things we've done is build a relationship with Rhodes University in Grahamstown, South Africa. Grahamstown, as it turns out, is not that much different than Syracuse. It's got a university up on a hill with a pretty good journalism program, and it's got a poor population that lives down at the bottom of the hill. And so we've been able, or we're going to be using the Common Fund grant to start a photo walk in Grahamstown on the same day as we do ours in Syracuse. We've already started swapping content with a newspaper in Grahamstown called Grocot's Mail. So we had some students go there over Christmas break and write profiles of people in that community, and that content ran in the stand, that content ran in Grocot's Mail. We've started each month swapping at least one story with them that we think is appropriate. And we're really looking forward to having this kind of parallel photo walks with Grahamstown to further build that relationship. Another thing that we'll be using the grant money for is to get more cameras, more loaner cameras. amateur photography is huge in the United States right now, and so a lot of people come with their own equipment that's pretty sophisticated. But of course, we always have people that don't have the equipment, and we want to be able to have them participate as well. So we have some cameras that we bought in year one of this project, but they're pretty much nearing the end of their lives and need to replace those. We also hire a professional photographer from the community to give people, quick half-hour training on how to frame a good shot. And as I think you saw, the photos turn out pretty well. The stand does other things as well, particularly in conjunction with our university student journalists. We did an in-depth piece on community relations with the police department called They Wear Blue. We looked at fair and unfair housing practices in our area called My Housing Matters. And we've got a really interesting project going on right now where we're focusing on fathers in the Southside community, and that's that last series of photos. So that's the Stand Southside Photo Walk. Thank you.
So, Gregg, I'm originally from Chicago, so your project resonates with me very much so. I wanted to highlight, you kind of touched upon this in your presentation, but I really wanted to uplift this notion of race because in the States, the topic of race and the racialization of, this toxic discourse, and Carlos, you talked a little bit about hate speech, for example, but institutionally and systemically, race has been a huge undercurrent of the segregation of communities. So I'm just curious, you said the white guy, Steve, in a predominantly black neighborhood. How do you get into those spaces? I mean, what's the secret to not exploiting the folks that you are trying to build these relationships with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, his, I think, first stroke of genius was hiring Ashley, who is accepted as a community member, and I think that helped a lot. And just his general guiding principle was that he wanted the stand to be of, by, and for the South Side. That he was not going. He's a pretty serious guy, but he did not want to impose his kind of sensibility onto the stand. I mean, he wants to make sure that the copy's clean and all that stuff, and we do have some quality control, but he started off very flexible in a listening kind of stance, and pretty quickly established a community board of advisors who are still involved and go on some of the trips. Like when we went to Grahamstown, I didn't go, but when Steve took his group over Christmas break, we had 2 of the community board members. And we also, there's a high school in that neighborhood called Fowler High School, and we got an administrator from the high school and some of the students from the school to come. So it wasn't just for the Newhouse students, it was also for people on the community to go explore, have this trip of a lifetime kind of situation. So that's helped a lot.
So one of the co-founders and project leads being a resident of the actual community, and then having a formal council where residents have power to give input and influence. Because I often hear this tension between quality control and the residents that you're working with, right? And so quality control, who defines it? How is it defined? Who makes the decisions? Who has power? That's always kind of a tense role to navigate.
Yeah, so we'll do, the editing class that I teach does some of the copy editing and stuff like that. So we'll check links, we'll check the spellings of proper names, we'll, change times and dates into AP style and stuff like that. But outside of that, we're very hands-off. We want it to sound like the South Side, and so we don't want to edit that out of the copy. And I just think, when Steve came in there, he's like, I'm not the expert on the South Side, you're the expert on the South Side. And I think that was really empowering to the people to even hear that. I think they're used to being talked down to. I think they're used to having people tell them how to fix their neighborhood, or having misguided initiatives kind of just come crashing in. And in this case, it was really just a process of soliciting input from the community itself.
Wonderful. And just one more follow-up question. In Chicago, oftentimes, so the local journalism ecosystem is struggling for a lot of dumb reasons. But one of the ways in which we were trying to inform our communities around the public service necessity of what journalism, the role that journalism plays, is to highlight the disinvestment in these communities that often get overlooked. Yeah. And then once you tell those stories, then business owners, businesses, and local officials began to see the opportunities of what reinvesting in those communities would look like. So I'm just curious if the stand has seen any traction around that at all.
That's a great question. I remember seeing a piece maybe last year in the Los Angeles Times that looked at even things like trash pickup, and they correlated it with the income of different neighborhoods and found that pickup times were being missed in the poorer neighborhoods significantly more often than in the wealthier neighborhoods. And I'm sure there are similar patterns, whether it's fixing potholes or investing in the schools or whatever, that that neighborhood, those constituents are not getting the attention they deserved. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a project we've done to date that really touches on that, but I would love to.
Yeah, absolutely. Maeve, Carlos, did you want to jump in on any of these questions that I just asked? Greg? That's all good. Yeah.
I can just add that race relations, for example, in a country like Lithuania, where you don't really have much, well, the diversity is more like on ethnic level. You have people from Polish communities, from Russian communities, but in terms of race, there's not much diversity. But still, actually last week we did one episode where we talked with a dance teacher who came from, he was living in France for a long time, and he's been teaching urban dance classes for the last 10 years in Lithuania. And we were talking about how the hip-hop culture and like black culture in general was kind of appropriated by Lithuanians in this kind of strange sense, because there were no history of that. So we are interested in like these cultural issues. For example, what it means to see a film like Black Panther being Lithuanian. How do you understand that? So we raise these questions in our podcast, and we wouldn't be able to raise those questions in like mainstream media, because they would think, like, who would be interested in that? So we go to these like niche topics that are going in that the conversation that are happening in Western countries. We want to bring them to Lithuania. So race is one of those questions that are interesting for us. But of course, the whole dynamics is completely different than in the U.S.
Interesting. So all three of you have, and I'll open it up to the room for more questions, but all three of you, there are two very interesting, I think, elements that maybe you undersell yourselves on, is that all three of you exhibited a lot of bravery in the work that you're doing, and you're probably not thinking so much about it as you're trying these new things, but I'm curious if you can think of when you were afraid and how you pushed through that for some of these experiments and talking to new audiences and engaging them. And the second theme, and so I'd love for all three of you to speak to that, pushing through fear and self-doubt in some of this work. And the second part of it is, you know, Carlos, you were talking about giving audiences who are typically ignored, giving them care, right? Audiences that are diverse, but typically don't feel value from mainstream media. And I feel like Maeve with the domestic violence survivors, and Gregg from the South Side. So just to talk a little bit more about the audience opportunities that, you know, folks that you're covering as folks that were welcoming, even though it seemed intimidating because they were so different from you, to welcome you, and also as potential audiences, as Carlos, you've already seen, to invest in your efforts. So Gregg, did you want to start off?
Sure. What was the first part of the question again? I'm sorry.
Bravery, like when you
Bravery,
were a
yes,
little
yes,
weird.
yes. So, I mean, Ashley's really the one that kind of stuck her neck out in the community, and Steve, to get this started. But I worked on a previous engagement project when I was at the Syracuse Daily called Central New York Speaks. And being an event planner is terrifying. You go through all this effort to set up the event, and 1 second you're panicked that no one's going to come. The next second you're panicked that everybody's going to come. You're not going to have enough coffee. You're not going to have enough cookies. And I know that Ashley feels that anxiety with the photo walk. And as you could see from the photos, like, we've been incredibly lucky with weather. Each photo walk, I mean, one day it will pour during our photo walk, and we'll deal with that challenge when it comes. But the stress is palpable every year about will anybody come? Will everybody come? Are we going to have enough cameras? And you just do the best you can, hope for the best, tell yourself that it's better to try than not to do it at all, and then go from there.
Great, thanks. Maeve?
Turns out booking a theatre tour is quite hard and not part of my job description and not something I have any experience in. So that's going to be interesting. I think with this project particularly, in the past, the Bureau Local has done things where we have spent a long time building up the story. We know what it is. We've scraped or found some data. We've cleaned it up. And then we produce a really well-constructed reporting recipe, and we pass that out to the local journalists, and they can kind of dig in and find their own things. With this project, it was very different. We got them on board really early, and at that stage, I didn't actually know if I had a story for them or not. I was saying to 20 journalists, I think there's something here. I'm hearing this stuff here. I'm going to do all this stuff, but I really need your help to come on board too. And it could have been that there wasn't a story, and I'd wasted a load of people's time. But so yeah, there's moments of kind of self-doubt, but I think you have to trust in your journalistic instincts, and then trust in people that they will do the work if they are engaged enough, and trust them that they won't just run and print the story and scoop all of us if we give them kind of first sight of information weeks or months in advance, that they will hold fast and publish as a team.
In terms of bravery, I don't know. I was thinking a lot that maybe one of the fears that I want to share, maybe this doesn't go directly to your question, but I think that this is important, that at one point it's like you feel like you are not a brave, but journalists doing important things when you go to communities that are unrepresented in usual media, but at the same time you feel like you don't want to exploit them, like, oh, now I went to Muslim family, now I went to Roma family, now I will talk about race, and like, what's the next marginalized group in society for me to kind of be a part of that, and then just leave it and move to some other things. So that is one of the fears, and you know that you kind of, when you put those people in the spotlight, you know that when you, there's a lot of, again, people on the internet who would be saying like, is it really a topic that you're doing? Is it like maybe you're just trying to see problems where there aren't. That's one of the like reactions that sometimes we get from people. So which is just isn't really inspiring. But we get much more inspiring reactions, and that really keeps us going. But this thing that you meet people and then you leave them, and you feel there's this feeling of exploitation a bit, and we want to escape it, but it's always there. So yeah, I think that's an important part.
So how do you hold on to that relationship so that the folks that you have touched and have gotten to know continue to engage, whether they inform your content, but also invest in your content eventually?
So our live events are one of those ideas to continue the conversation. Like, okay, we did a podcast episode on one topic. People heard those people talking on their earphones, right? But now we want to make an opportunity to see them live and ask questions and just continue the conversation. So, yeah, that's one of the ways to create a new platform for that. That's what we want to do.
Maeve or Gregg, have you thought about continuing to build those relationships and sustain those relationships, even though you're on to the next thing?
Yeah, for us, I mean, Yes, so we're continuing to build relationships with the journalists. The kind of beauty of the Bureau Local project is all of those people are much better placed to keep having those discussions with their community members than we are. So we're doing this element of kind of taking things to them, but many of them did follow-up stories on different elements specific to their regions that we wouldn't have found the kind of national picture for. So yeah, it's kind of opened doors for some of those journalists to keep reporting on things, which was really good.
That's smart.
Yeah, so some of our feature stories, the subjects of those feature stories turned into writers for The Stand. They kind of knew about The Stand, maybe they picked it up, but they weren't really invested in it, and then boom, there they are in it, and they love it, and they were interviewed by one of their neighbors because we have community correspondence, and so they immediately get the idea that they can do this too, and they can, and so one of the ways we recruit correspondence is by just writing about the community, and those people turn into supporters, and we don't ever ask for money from the community, although it's an ongoing debate whether it was originally envisioned that the Stand would somehow become self-supporting, and that the university would back away from it. And now I don't even know if we necessarily think that's desirable. It's a great outlet for our students, and if there's anybody that has the money in Syracuse to invest in a project like this, it's the university. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Interesting. So we'd love to, well, first of all, I wanted to, well, no, I won't do that. I wanted to open it up to the room if anyone had any questions or comments. I don't know if there's a microphone, but it's a small room, so you can project. Anyone? Ferris? Oh. Oh, I guess we have a microphone.
Okay, I don't know if it's on. Can you hear?
I can hear you.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
I was just wondering if. Oh, sorry. I was just wondering if you're interested in verbatim theatre as a way of kind of incorporating journalism and a community at the same time, or if that wouldn't really be in the Bureau's remit.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as a concept. I'm not sure that the Bureau is so limited. Like, we're a team of, I think, about 15 total, and 5 of us are on this Bureau Local project. I think it works in this sense because this woman was already doing her piece. I'm not sure I could have gone to her and said, hey, write me a play while you're at it. But I do think that there's incredible power in, like, I'm a huge fan of theatre myself, and I think there's incredible power in telling stories in that way and getting those stories out to people that might not read their papers or watch the TV, people who might not trust news as a form of, engaging in debate or information, or yeah, just different ways of getting a point across that's much more emotive and kind of visceral than a list of statistics and facts. So I would love to see more of that, and I think what Storyworks in the US are doing is really cool. They do stuff like they take it to the communities in the way we're trying to do. Yeah, the more of that, the better. And I would love the Bureau to be involved with that, but it would be a hard sell, I think, to the editors to say, let me do that as well as trying to do an investigation.
Actually, on that, as far as selling, all right, I'm killing time for you guys to brainstorm questions. So, the prevalent concern that I'm always hearing with community building strategies, especially with in-person, is we don't have time, we don't have resources. So how do you respond to that concern?
Something like the photo walk is probably as cheap a way as you can get brilliant content for your newspapers I can think of. And it's really, it just requires a different mindset, I think, more than funding. And, the cameras, and there's some cost there. And the daily in Syracuse that I worked for would never lend out its equipment to people, but it could, right? And in a way, it would be, you can't buy this kind of content, I don't think. So I think that whatever their concerns are that would keep them from doing something like this, whatever their concerns are that made it necessary that somebody else in the community step up and do something like this, I think are really largely unfounded.
Yeah, maybe you could frame it as, every time I go and talk to a source or do an interview, they always have 12 ideas for what else I should be looking at and who else I should be talking to. So if you could frame it like that, the more people we talk to, you get more ideas for stories, the better. But also we do stuff like we hold hack days where we get everyone together in one room across cities in the UK to dig into one bit of research. And that's just time consuming in that it takes a long time to get to organize those and to book the rooms and to get the data ready. But then you get 160 people we had at one time all digging into the same thing, finding different stories. And if you had 160 people coming to you individually and asking you questions, that would take 6 months. So it's kind of, it pays off in that sense.
Oh, I got you, girl. All right. Carlos, did you want to answer, and then we'll...
Yeah, so just quickly add that in our case, community building is connected with the development of the whole podcast and the Nook platform. For example, if we are hosting a live event, we have a new podcast episode after that event, so it's new content for us. Or for example, if you want to engage with our listeners through Patreon campaign, we also, that will bring us more patron sponsors, and we will give more money to make our content. So it is also has this like financial value. But of course, I'm not saying that we want to build community to get more money. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that community building goes together with the building of our podcast. It just goes hand in hand.
I can tell you're a menacing mogul, so thank you for explaining. Yes.
Hi, Krina Boros from Open Democracy and Investigate Europe. Very good question for Maeve. You said you have over 600 members. How do you keep in touch with them? How do you engage with them? How do you get them together? I mean, it must have been quite a master puppeteer type of job. Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Yes, it kind of grew exponentially over that first. We've only been going a year. And we have a mailing list. We just do bulletins and call out. So if we have a specific project that we know, do you want to come aboard this thing we're doing on council taxes or on Facebook and elections, whatever it might be, we do that call out. We have a Slack group, and we have a general kind of chat page on that, but then if we have a specific investigation, we have private channels, and we ask people, we kind of onboard people and ask them to sign up to a series of principles around that so that they know that they can trust everyone in that channel. We're still exploring whether Slack is the right platform because not everybody uses Slack. I hadn't used it before this. We tried to do as many face-to-face meetings as we can. So we've held two big hack days, which each involved going to simultaneously having events in 5 cities involving scores and scores of people. And we want to do more of those. But yeah, it's a big effort to 680 people. Some of them are more engaged than others. We're looking at ways to try and deepen some of those relationships rather than expanding further. Yeah, no worries.
I wanted to, it's funny, this is my first festival, and I'm seeing how the panels are back-to-back, so I promised that when I was moderating, I'd leave some time for networking so that we don't get kicked out or beaten up. Maybe I spoke too soon. But I wanted each of you to maybe give us one piece of advice to move forward on past some of the fears that you were able to push through, and also maybe one kind of observation in your experience with the Finding Common Ground cohort, and maybe that before Perugia, you felt a little bit alone, but maybe I'm just curious your experience spending a couple of days now with your fellow colleagues across the world.
Well, I mean, it's the support that Finding Common Ground has given us is really tremendous, and thank you to the News Integrity Initiative for that, and the Bosch Foundation. Yeah, Bosch Foundation for sure, and University of Oregon. So, I mean, I think there's a growing recognition that the commercial model is has some serious problems, and the fact that these foundations are stepping up is really huge. So if you have a project idea that you think is worthy of funding, you know, we were kind of surprised. Again, I think the Southside Photo Walk is a very simple project. It's not the first time it was done, but they saw that it was having impact, and they funded it. And that encourages us to reach out to other foundations and more funding and try to grow this even bigger and try to do some more serious investigations, like I think Jenny was suggesting, in terms of distribution of resources on the South Side.
I guess I would say for advice, to think of this as, you know, all journalists, we're all talking to sources all the time, we're all trying to tell stories all the time. This is just a new way of thinking about doing that. And in a media landscape where it seems like people judge the worth of a story and how many clicks it gets, this is a way to just kind of reinterpret what it means to get your story out there and to be heard by the right people and to be hearing from the right people and people that you might not immediately go to on the end of a phone call, but that you kind of come across in day-to-day life. And I think just being part of this cohort has been great, because community engagement can be quite a nebulous concept, quite kind of, you know, I wasn't quite sure what it meant. And just hearing specific examples like this, you know, I'm thinking we could do a photo walk around Islington. That would be really interesting. Or we could be doing these kind of, you know, common space events and doing a podcast after it. It's just really good to get inspired with kind of tangible, practical examples that I'm now going to steal.
Yes.
Yeah, for me, this Common Ground project proved that communities actually matter. I mean, you always know that it matters, but when you work in this like media climate that we have in our countries, it's quite cynical in a lot of sense. Like, editors see things through this like market, whether content has market value or not, whether it will give you more money or not. And things like community building, they are like those of those like nice to have things that you never do in the end, because you do some things that you need for profit. So it's really inspiring to be here with people who see community building not as some kind of nice choice of words, but actual thing. And I also want to add that I think it's important to build community among journalists themselves. For example, in our case, we were all freelancers working alone, and then we decided it's much better to be together. And we also have like a Facebook group of around, I think, 40 people who are like we call them interns, but in general, they are just people who work in media, like can it be other writers, graphic designers, photographers, who are always there. And if we have some kind of task that we aren't able to do themselves, or want to discuss things, we just write down there. And there's a lot of people who also want to create kind of new journalism in Lithuania, and they are there. Our like a small community there, and we feel strong. Like, for example, I met Berta. She always was thinking that she's a great journalist, and now we work together. I mean, we both feel more powerful now. So yeah, community is about journalism as well.
And your takeaway, who's your new best friend in finding common ground? The three.
Gregg and Maeve, definitely.
Well handled.
So on that, thank you. I wanted to give one shout out and a possible resource for the room and for my esteemed panelists. The European Journalism Center launched the Engaged Journalism Accelerator project on Thursday that the News Integrity Initiative is also supporting. Very similarly, this organization will have mini grants, coaching, and mentorship available for European newsrooms to try some of these strategies out. So please check out the Engaged Journalism Accelerator project by the European Journalism Center. And I want to thank all three of you for your inspiring stories and being brave and innovative in this new landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, Jenny.
Yeah,
Great job.
Okay, ja, klar. Ja. Danke. Habt ihr jetzt überall Musik? Habt ihr jetzt überall Musik? Ihr habt keine? Nein. Okay. Ich weiß es nicht. Da müssen wir einfach mal winken. Also ihr könnt hier, ich würde es dann einfach an euch geben, wenn ihr dran seid. Ihr könnt einfach hier auf diesen
Auf rechts.
Okay. Ja? Okay.
Funktioniert?
I hope. Hi. Sorry, maybe I'm a little bit too loud. Thank you for coming to our panel. We were told yesterday that if you just skim through the program, you could read it maybe wrong, the title, and that you might think it's fucking up Germany's public broadcasters. So for those who are here expecting that, we're sorry. That's not the topic, but it's going to be interesting in a different way. So yeah, we're here to talk about Funk. I'm Isabel Hummel. I'm an editor for Funk, and I have a weird double role today because my colleague Q couldn't be here, so I'm moderating a bit and answering my own questions. Next to me is Julia Rekop. She's an editor for Y Kollektiv. And to my left is Eva Schulz, who's an editor and the host of Deutschland 3000. So, but before we start, maybe, are there a lot of German speakers in the room, or is it...
Who speaks German?
Or who speaks English? Maybe the other way around. Someone who
doesn't
speak German. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So for you two guys, we're going to do it in English. All right. And anyone here who has heard of Funk yet? Okay, some. All right. But we'll start with a little explanation. Funk is an online content network by public broadcasters ARD and ZDF. It was launched in October 2016, and it mainly targets 14 to 29-year-olds, but of course, younger ones and older ones can consume the content too. It's, as of today, we have about 60 shows, and the little revolution, I'd say, that was Funk is that it really is just online only. Like, we only produce for the social platforms. That was something that we couldn't do before as public broadcasters. Like in Germany, when you wanted to do something online, you had to do it in the normal program before. Like, you had to have it on a radio show or in a TV program. But for Funk, there was made an exception, so everything that we do is really just for online. And yeah, so today we have like 60 formats. There are shows on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Snapchat. We have also a Facebook bot. And there's going to be some experimentation in the future with WhatsApp. So it's constantly evolving. Funk is, the headquarters is based in Mainz. I hope I placed it right on the card, I'm not sure. And the headquarters is led by SWR and ZDF. Like, all the people working there come from SWR or ZDF, but the whole content of Funk is produced by all the regional public broadcasters in Germany, which you have listed here, and ZDF, and then of course all the production companies associated with the public broadcasters. So, and it's not all in Mainz, it's like all over Europe. For example, me, I'm sitting in Berlin, I'm working for ZDF, but we're in Berlin and not in Mainz. Julia is working for a production company, Sendefähig, who is, you're in Bremen mainly, but also in Berlin. And Eva is working also for the production company Labo M, which is in Berlin, but also producing the format for RBB. So sort of the content from Funk comes from all over Germany. And I think for us, and for all journalists who wanted to do cool stuff on the web, and for production companies who've been wanting to do that for a long time, Funk was sort of not only, I think, like a fresh breath of air, but really like a storm of fresh air. We finally had the chance and someone to give the money to us to develop some cool stuff. And I think all of us, we are in the positions that we have now because of Funk. I think in the system that was there before, probably we would not have the positions that we have now. So for us, that was really great. Yeah, and I think we're going to start by talking a little bit of our shows. We're going to start by age. And so Julia is going to start because Y Kollektiv is the oldest
by age
show.
Of the formats,
yeah,
not of the people.
So we're going to start with Y Kollektiv because they're the oldest ones. There you go.
Yeah, we are the oldest ones. My name is Julia again, everybody. And we started around 2 years ago, so even a little bit before the official start of Funk. So our collective, that's us. That means we are a lot of reporters, and we're doing short documentaries, reportages, or something in the mix between those two. We are doing one film a week. It's usually around 15 minutes long. Can be a little bit shorter, can be a little bit longer. That's the beauty of the internet, right? We are publishing mainly on YouTube. That's our main platform. It's a requirement of Funk that you decide on which platform you want to publish mainly. So we also have a Facebook channel, but Facebook never really worked out for us. So we went to YouTube to publish our documentaries there. We are reporters, and we are also the hosts, but not in a classic way, because we believe that it makes a difference who makes a film. So we want to make that transparent. We want to show, okay, this is me, I chose that topic, this is why I chose it, and this is how I'm doing it. So that's why we are in front of the camera. We are not classic hosts. So, maybe just to give you an impression of how we do it, there's a little trailer I would like to show you.
Need to be protected, and one way to protect them is to share their stories and to pick them up and continue them as soon as you can, preferably before they die. You can't kill a story by killing a journalist.
That's not from our presentation.
Where this is coming from, but this is not the sound from our video.
Are more likely to be loyal, which creates a stronger bond between.
I don't know where this is coming from.
I think maybe because they stopped the stream.
Yeah.
Oh,
it might be that Google advertising video that's running.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we start again the video, or? Yeah? Okay.
It's okay. So we'll try again.
Yeah.
How do I push play here?
The next one.
Oh, yeah. Can we have some sound? That was a little overview of things we do. I just brought you here some of the screenshots to talk a little about what topics we're covering. It's really diverse, which is nice for us. I think it's also nice for the community, but it's not that we can target one particular community because our topics are quite diverse. So, for instance, we have had a story on Instagram and on influencers that was quite successful for us. We were covering Bitcoins, that's something I did at the end of last year. But we are also doing things like the story called Warlords. That was a team of authors who went to the Central African Republic and covering the ongoing civil war there. That's something that we don't really talk about much in Germany, but we thought it's important anyway, so that's why we do it. And our story of this week, really successful, is about smoking, as you might have figured from the picture. And that was a very personal story from the author because she wanted to quit and she found it very hard, and she just made a film out of that, how she is trying to stop and what is keeping her from it and how she is finally succeeding. So that was something that also touched a lot of people. We have a couple of credos I would like to share with you. We say we don't want to do any staged bullshit. which might sound really normal for journalists, but actually it's not, because if you're talking about TV, usually, you know, it's always like, oh, can you come back through that door again? Can I have another picture of your feet? And that's all really staged, right? And we don't want to do that. We want to make pure and raw documentaries, even if that means that sometimes we make mistakes, or we say something wrong, or the picture is blurry, but we want to give a really raw style. That also means we rather want to be honest than totally objective, because with our personal approach that we have, it's always honest, you always know what we think, but sometimes it's not that full-on neutrality, objectivity, because we believe it doesn't exist anyway. Also, we want to spark the discussion. Of course, we want to do that, but that means that we also really have to take care of the comments, and sometimes, if it's a controversial topic, it means a lot of work, and maybe we can also discuss that a little bit later, because I think we all have to do with that. Okay, so next is Eva.
No, not
No,
age-wise.
next is me. Eva is the young one, yeah, sorry. Right, so yeah, I'm an editor in charge of Jäger and Sammler, Hunters and Collectors in English, and we produced the format of the show. I think format does not exist in English. The show, we produced it together with our production company UFA, and at ZDF we partnered up with Frontale 21, which is the big investigative resort. So when we started out, we did not know much. Like when we were developing the format, we knew that it was going to be a Facebook show. And we knew, because we were partnered up with Frontale 21, that we would not develop a nice info show, like not a on the one hand, on the other hand thing, but really something that was confrontational and maybe at best investigative, and that we would not mind being unpleasant if it was called for, and like really put the finger in the wound. So that was supposed to be our core, and we didn't have a lot of time. Which I think we had 1 month before we had to go online to start, which I think in retrospect was good, because we couldn't overthink it. So yeah, and we have every week we have a new topic. Our main video is on Mondays, and then for the rest of the week we have infographics, we have snippets that we thought were interesting but somehow didn't fit into the video, or maybe thought we're better off as standalone. We have, I think, up until now, we've done 77 topics, so we've done quite a lot. And maybe to give you an impression of what we actually want our format to be like, what we believe to be the core, this is a snippet of Neue Rechte Welle, which is up to date our most successful video. And well, our host Nemi and my colleague Hio, last year they went to well, see some rock concerts. So yeah. Und.
Rechtsrock-Event in Südthüringen. 6000 Neonazi.
Völker, die nicht zu meinem Volk gehören.
Wer ist Ihr Volk?
Ich sag, warum du so lachst? Also ich bin bekannter Nationalsozialist, und für mich sind alle Völker, die Völker müssen bei ihren Völkern bleiben.
Das heißt, wenn die Völker woanders hingehen, dann werden sie nicht mehr respektiert.
Der Nationalsozialismus ist die politische Form unserer Art, nichts anderes. Es ist unser Volkstum, das politisch verfasste deutsche Volkstum.
Das herrscht so ja in anderen Völkern vor.
Uns geht es um unser Volk und nur um unser Volk. Das ist alles, was hier zu sagen ist.
So yeah, that also happened at the concert. He organized the festival, and he also has a pub or restaurant in the town, and they sell schnitzel for €8.88. He also has an online shop where he sells some questionable merchandise, but he kind of also always defends himself not being a Nazi. So, but Nemi went there and confronted him, so that's just the next bit.
Genau, da habe ich jetzt hier zum Beispiel einen Ausdruck
für Pärchen, wenn die sich gemeinsam dasselbe T-Shirt quasi anziehen wollen oder ein ähnliches T-Shirt, dann gibt es für den Mann die Edition Adolf und für die Frau Eva.
So. Man kann natürlich auch andere Namen eintragen, wenn man das
Aber
möchte.
welcher Adolf, welche Eva sind damit gemeint?
Ja, die Leute, die es anhaben. Also da gibt es ja verschiedene Namen. Da kann man ja auch Rudolf eintragen oder
ja, aber
Hermann.
Da steht ja jetzt Adolf und Eva.
Beispielbilder. Beispielbilder müssen immer provokant sein und für die Werbezwecke gut
Warum
darstellbar.
sind genau Adolf und Eva provokant?
Das weiß ich nicht, sagen Sie es mir doch mal.
Naja, weil man ja theoretisch davon ausgehen könnte, dass Sie hier Adolf Hitler und Eva Braun meinen.
Jetzt haben Sie aber was gesagt. Das hätte ich eigentlich nicht gedacht jetzt.
Ja.
Also wenn Sie es so sagen, nee, denke ich aber auch was anderes eigentlich.
Ich verkaufe mich auch gerade ein bisschen für blöd.
Weil wenn man nämlich dann auf die Beschreibung geht, sehen Sie, dass man da auch die normalen Namen eintragen kann. Und, ja.
Die 88, was bedeutet das?
Das ist keine 8, das ist eine 8 und das ist eine 8.
Und zusammen ist eine 88, was bedeutet das?
Geburtsjahrgang, ich weiß nicht.
Ja, naja, gemeinhin nimmt man ja an, dass
man
es
kann
Hitler heißen
Man kann ja auch eine 77 drauf machen, für die es wollen.
Sie haben ja das als Beispielbild gewählt.
Genau.
Und Sie sagen, ein Beispielbild soll provokant sein. Ja. Warum ist das provokant, Ihrer Meinung nach?
Das sieht doch gerade vorher funktioniert bei Ihnen.
Das heißt, Sie wollen, dass die Menschen, die das sehen, an Adolf Hitler und Eva Braun denken?
Ich sagten,
ich musste ja daran denken und Sie sagten, bei mir hat es geklappt.
Ja, dass es provokant war. Aber ich sage Ihnen ja, in der Beschreibung steht ja eindeutig drin, was es ist.
Frank kennt die juristischen Feinheiten und weiß genau, bis wohin er gehen kann. Seine Gaststätte ist der Szenetreffpunkt für Neonazis und Rechte im Süden von Thüringen.
Sie haben ein bestimmtes Ziel und Sie möchten, dass Deutschland
das Land der Deutschen bleibt, genau.
Das Land der Deutschen bleibt. Und jetzt frage ich Sie, bin ich für Sie deutsch?
Kann man so schlecht sagen.
Warum?
Weil ich Ihren Background nicht kenne.
Kann ich Ihnen gerne erzählen.
Ja.
Meine Eltern sind aus dem Libanon, aber ich bin hier geboren.
Also sind Sie Libanese. Man kann eine Staatsbürgerschaft haben, aber man ist das, was man durch Geburt ist.
Aber das ist sozusagen gegen geltendes Recht, was Sie hier propagieren, sozusagen, das wissen Sie?
Deswegen sage ich, da gibt es eine Stelle, die das dann irgendwann bearbeitet.
Nee, das geht auch nicht um eine Stelle oder nicht, sondern die Bedingungen sind ja anders mittlerweile.
Es gibt ja immer verschiedene Rechte, die sich im Laufe der Jahrhunderte entwickeln oder dann wieder verschieben.
Aber das geltende Gesetz sagt, wenn man hier geboren ist...
Aber in den 60ern war zum Beispiel die Homo-Ehe verboten. Jetzt ist es das anderes Gesetz.
Ja, aber wir haben uns ja weiterentwickelt in der Gesellschaft.
Ja, vielleicht entwickeln wir uns wieder weiter.
Und dann? Wohin wird
das wird dann die Stelle festlegen, wenn es soweit ist.
Na, aber aus Ihrer Sicht, was wäre denn eine Weiterentwicklung?
Aus meiner Sicht, eine Weiterentwicklung ist, dass das Land Deutschland, das Land der Deutschen bleibt.
So yeah, this was sort of a prime example of what we strive for, what we want to do with our show. And we've done 77 topics up until now, and it's a very wide range. You just see some of the examples here, like we've talked about. We've talked about weapons export, Germany's weapons export. We talked about the new coalition. We talked about right-wing populists in Europe. We talked about police brutality. So yeah, we have a really wide range, and we have, of course, our core that we want to be confrontational, that we want to pick topics that are important for society. And the other focus that we have, because we are Facebook format, we have a big focus on visuals. We have a fantastic art director, and he calls our design a fluid design, because every week we have a new design. So there's not just one Jäger und Sammler design. Every week it changes. But still, every week you can say, hey, that's a Jäger und Sammler video. It's very distinctive, so that's sort of our USP, which we are really proud of. And here's a little, and we pay special attention because it's Facebook for the early hooks, because we know everyone is just scrolling through the feed, so we just have like 3 to 5 seconds to catch their attention. And so we really, like, when we have a treatment, we pay special attention to the visuals and special attention to the beginning of the video, the early hook, as we call it. So that's just, I think, 3 examples.
Ich bin eine Schlampe. Sieht man doch.
Du verdammte Hure!
that's Jäger and Semmler. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention we have sort of a rotating system of hosts. I think now, right about now, we have 4 to 5 hosts that are always rotating, and sometimes if we have a special topic where we know we have someone who's already has an extensive background in it, sometimes we invite guest hosts into our show. So yeah, that was a short overview of Jäger and Semmler, and we're going to go into the special learnings later. So I'm going to give it up to our youngest one, Eva.
Hi, I'm Eva, and I developed last year a new format for Funk, which is called Deutschland 3000. That was happening in light of the German federal elections, where I had the feeling that I, as a young person under the age of 30, don't have any voices or media platforms that I can turn to form an opinion about what's going on politically in Germany, just from a young perspective. And when I told Funk about it, they were like, yeah, actually that's an edge, just do it. It was literally like that, and then they helped me develop the format, and now I'm heading a team which is made out of our target group together with my colleague Hanne here. Our editors are all under the age of 30. The youngest one is 21, then they are 27, 28. And what we are doing is, like, our primary goal as a Facebook format is actually not primarily to build a community, but to really spark these meaningful interactions. And it was even that goal before Facebook named it that way, because we think that in order to form opinions, you need this discussion and you need to spark debate. So we were always thinking, like, how can our content spark reaction, shares, and debate? And that is, as Isabel just said, it's not going to work if you do like a pro-con video about, yeah, party 1 says this, party B says this, and maybe you want to see it like this, or maybe you want to see it like that. So we decided on taking strong positions, which is mainly that I, as a host, take one position in every video, often with a very strong thesis in the beginning, and then we present arguments about that. And obviously, it's not the aim that everybody then has to agree with me, but rather that people see it and then start a discussion. Like, the best comment that I always am happy about is when people say, well, I really don't agree with you on everything, but you did give me new arguments or new thoughts, and that is exactly what we want. And I want to show you maybe the first 30 seconds of a video, like of a typical Deutschland 3000 video about arms exports. Die
Türkei führt gerade eine Militäroffensive gegen die Kurden in Syrien. Und das mit deutschen Panzern. Sorry, aber wie kann das sein?
Ich halte es nicht für vernünftig, Panzer beispielsweise in Krisenregionen zu liefern. Das werden wir anders machen.
Weil die Türkei mit Waffen beliefert wird, ist die Opposition ziemlich pisst.
Was verletzt denn bitte unsere Sicherheitsinteressen mehr als ein völkerrechtswidriger Angriff eines NATO-Landes gegen einen Nachbarn?
Stoppen Sie endlich alle geplanten militärischen Kooperationen mit der Türkei.
Diese Kritik geht genau an die richtige Adresse. Denn nur die Bundesregierung darf die Lizenz zum Töten vergeben. Der Grund? Kriegswaffen.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't have English subtitles, but I hope that you could get anyways that we are heavily optimizing for Facebook. I'm going to talk about that later when we come to the questions. This video starts with a strong thesis. It has up to now some 360,000 views, got shared thousands of times. These are 4 thumbnails of other videos that we do and that also stand for typical formats that we use. For example, we often also, like, I sometimes host these videos and present them from the green screen, but sometimes we also invite people who are directly affected by certain policies. For example, 2 weeks ago we had a video where a woman talked about their abortions, because right now we have a strong, heavy discussion about abortion laws in Germany. Then we have migrants talking about what is it like when people in Germany don't know how to pronounce your name and how that goes on your nerves and really affects you, and an identity topic, very emotional. We also talk about our right-wing populist party and how the rest of the other parties in the Bundestag cope with them, all kinds of topics. And whenever our staff proposes a topic, the first thing they have to do and to pitch to us is, okay, who's going to share this video and what kind of interaction do we want? We have defined a whole set of viral triggers that we see working with our audience, and that we always, like, attribute to every video. Okay, which kind of trigger is this going to push? And then we asked, like, what can people discuss here? Is the thesis, the stance that we take strong enough in order for people to be provoked by it, or to be strongly agreeing with it, or to share their personal experiences? And then we asked, okay, who shares this? And that's actually the core of our strategy, is to actually, like, we have basically two target audiences. You could say that we have this big target audience, like this. That would be some 20 to 29-year-olds, and now you could accuse me of not defining it any stronger or any more deep. But what we then do for every video is we define a new target audience. We actually call it the distributor audience. That would be a small group within the target audience, which we want to not only watch the video and be better informed or somehow touched by it, but also to share it and to discuss it. And that actually helps us very much in reaching out to very different groups and then bringing them all to Deutschland 3000. And one video which lately was very successful with this was this one here, which again is a very different format and maybe not journalistic at first sight.
Helden gesucht. Die Gesundheit anderer ist dir wichtig, deine eigene nicht so sehr.
Neue Stellen in der Pflege schaffen. Aber das ist lange nicht genug.
2016 leisteten Altenpfleger über 9,5 Millionen.
Ja, und Moment, jetzt haben Sie mich zum Lachen gebracht.
That is one of our most successful videos lately, and I like it very much because it's a prime example of our strategy. What we do is we think social from the very beginning, not just after the video is published, but here we wanted to do something about caretakers in Germany because it's a big topic, and we saw it being covered in many mainstream media, but not from a young perspective. So there was clearly a need for covering this topic because there's so many young people wanting to go into that job and having doubts, or already being in that job and having several challenges and problems. So we wanted to cover that topic. And then we observed very intensely for weeks this group of caretakers, and especially young caretakers, on social media. We also called them, we called up random people whom we know through friends who are doing this, the education to be a nurse, or who are already on the job, and then we watched them on Twitter, we watched them in the Facebook groups that they organize in, and there's huge Facebook group for German caretakers where they share their memes and share where they discuss new policies and what's going on in their jobs, so we could really get a broad picture of what's bothering them and what are they coping with in everyday life. And for example, I always thought, okay, yeah, the biggest problem surely is that they are all underpaid, and we have to do something about the salary of these social jobs and of caretakers, but actually that wasn't their biggest problem. That was maybe their second biggest problem. But talking to them and to these often highly idealistically motivated people, it turned out they didn't care too much about the salary. The problem that they saw was that they were too few, and they wanted there to be more colleagues so that they could spend more time with their patients. And that's also what the memes and what certain Twitter trends and trending hashtags were about, where they shared in a very cynical tonality the everyday life and challenges that they were facing. And then we adopted this biggest problem and their tonality, the cynicism that the German speakers, I'm sorry for the English speakers, so the video is like it comes across as a recruitment spot for young caretakers, but it's actually a very cynical thing, saying, yeah, if you want to be heavy lifting all day and being underpaid, come in die Pflege, get into caretaking. And we did it in this cynical, humoristic way because that was exactly the tonality that we observed the caretakers using. So we put the biggest political problem into a video that was highly shareable for them. And that worked out very fine. It has some 1.8 million views right now, thousands and thousands of shares and comments, and We learned, again, even after publishing so much from this community, because we saw, we got completely new insights into the situations they were facing, we got new arguments, and I think we already have like 1 to 2 new topics lined up to get into that community that we now have, also in the subscribers with Deutschland 3000, and to serve them again this topic, which is still highly topical, and unfortunately, because our Minister of Health had anything else to do right now, apparently, than to take care of this pressing problem. This video is probably very soon reach the 2 million and maybe the 2.5 million, because it's evergreen content until that guy does something about it. And also what we then do once it's published is that we actively seed it. So we go back into those Facebook groups and post the video. We contact their typical mediums and like Facebook pages or Twitter influencers and ask them to share the video so that we really get into these distributor audiences and reach out to these particular subgroups. And that has proven very successful for Deutschland 3000. Yeah.
All right, thank you. We're going to talk a bit more about our learnings after presenting our shows. But maybe before we do that, do you already have questions? Like, did we maybe forget to present something? Do you have some questions about our TV shows? Not TV shows, sorry. I did not have enough coffee this morning. Our online shows, of course. So yeah, do you already have questions? Or, oh yeah, there's one.
Hey, thanks, I'm Alex. Very good to see your videos. So one question I asked myself is, and I tried to find this out on my phone, do you offer your videos on other places other than those large social media companies? And what is your thinking on, in terms of, you know, putting out content on these large platforms, giving them, you know, free content, and are there any non-commercial alternatives where you know your content is accessible?
Yeah, there is. Funk has a website where you can see all the videos. So that if you do not have Facebook or you do not have YouTube or you do not want to use it, you can see our content there. But the strategy of Funk, that's the main, that's how it started, was to say, no, we want to reach the young audience, and the only way we see that we can reach them is actually through the social platforms. And we've talked yesterday, a little bit about that of course it is problematic because we're very dependent on them. Like if, for example, Facebook decided from one day to the other to shut down our site, we would lose our audience. So we're dependent on the platforms, and of course we are producing content for them. So there's of course the critical aspect about it, and I think you have to talk about it and to have it in mind, but at the moment I think it was the right strategy for Funk to say we're going to do that, because otherwise it would not have been that easy, or actually impossible, to reach the young audience. That's at least how I see it.
Yeah, if you're a new player and you want to reach your young audience, it's just most effective to do that on Facebook or on YouTube, because there is this website, but actually it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you're a 14-year-old person or a 29-year-old, usually you don't want to see exactly the same content, right? So if you go to that site, you see a lot of different things, and they might seem totally random to you because it's not what really interests you. So on YouTube and Facebook, we can target our audiences much more, concrete.
Thank you. How do you measure success for yourself? I mean, you don't necessarily have to reach that many people because you don't need to earn money. So what's success for you? How do you define that you do a good job?
Well, I mean, we do have to reach people because we have benchmarks. Like every show has a bench. Like we have certain like you have to have so many views, or you have to have that watch time. Like we have benchmarks from Funk that we actually have to achieve. But that set aside, I think the main goal for us is to engage people. You know, to see that people are discussing our videos, that you have comments, that we actually have an impact. So I think that's of course we want to reach people, because if you do a great video and you're convinced it's a fantastic video and then only, I don't know, 2,000 people see it, is that a success? I don't know. It might still be a good video, but if no one sees it, you do not achieve anything. So it's sort of a mix. And at Jäger und Sammler, I mean, we know what triggers people. Like, we know there's certain topics, if we do them, that it's sort of guaranteed that we will have lots of reach, lots of views. And that's fine, and they're also important topics, and we do them. But at the same time, sometimes we decide on topics because we think they're important, all the while knowing that they might not get a lot of reach. But we think because we're a public broadcaster, we also have the obligation to do that, actually. But it has to be a good mix. That's my opinion on that.
I think, yeah, we don't have any like CEO in the form of a private company that's pressuring us, but we still have a public mandate. So if we had that, like, Funk is strongly innovation driven, and that means that if after half a year, but after a year, if a new format doesn't succeed and gaining a community of views or whatever is on the platform would be the relevant variables that you turn to, then formats also get stopped again. And we've seen that like a dozen times at least. Yeah. But at the same time, what I really enjoy is that they are still, like, we have those benchmarks in order to answer that public mandate and say, yeah, we're doing something that 70,000 people or 100,000 subscribers for Y-Click TV are interested in and growing. But still, they give us the freedom to experiment and also to fail. And that is something that I'm so happy to see, that there's a new culture of failing within German public broadcasters, and they tell us, okay, this video maybe not gained your average view count, but you gained new knowledge that is going to be distributed among all of our formats and among the network, and that is worthwhile very much. So they look at engagement figures, and I'm very happy that they also do not only look at view counts, because sometimes these old guys in the suits very at the top of the public broadcasters, they look at view counts, and they see our formats on the screens of their kids, and they say, why does this only have 100,000 views? But they don't see the comment numbers or how we maybe reach a target audience that is hard to reach. Funk does see that, so they redefine what does success mean on the social web, and they also have these broader aims of innovation and gathering knowledge that then can be also given to all these other stations that you saw lined up there. And that's something I think is really finally happening, and it's very, very good and worthwhile. Should we maybe?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the insight. I have two questions. Number one, have you measured the effect of the recent changes in the Facebook algorithm? And number two, do you spend money on social media marketing, and what do you do in these ways to reach new audiences?
Do you want to answer?
You can start if you want.
I was particularly excited about the algorithm change because we had a 3-month break after the first season of Deutschland 3000, so right after the federal election, end of September, we stopped for 3 months to do a redevelopment of the show. And then, like, having a completely quiet Facebook page that then in January starts again, I was like, oh my God. They changed the algorithm, is this going to work? But they changed it much to our favor, because they are now even more fostering meaningful interaction, and they are, which is very interesting, looking at, for example, which was new to me, they are now also looking at not only public shares, but shares in the messenger, which, for example, if you do a video about abortion, is very worthy. So that what we are now seeing is that we are even more successful than in the first season. Like, the numbers peaked, and now we have an average of some 250 to 300,000 views, and went 2 times already since January super viral with a political format where I'm like, okay, that's awesome. So when I hear at other panels people complaining about, oh, journalism doesn't get the reach that it should get on Facebook, to be honest, I think that some publishing houses and stations just should also think about how they allocate resources, because you have to moderate the discussion, and you have to moderate and hone these meaningful interactions and not stop the moment you publish something. And that is actually something I would kind of accuse all these publishers who are like whining here, because many of them are still not used to also spark debate and hone it, or like pflegen. But at the same time, what we also see, and I think what we notice at Deutschland 3000 is that subscribers and fans of our page, and I think that's something that you share with Jäger und Sammler, is not all 60, 70,000 subscribers or however many you have get served a video in their streams anymore. They have to actively go to the fan page, which they normally won't. Like, they won't go every week. And that's also why Deutschland 3000 doesn't have the strategy of, oh yeah, we have to build a community like you would do on YouTube, but we think about, okay, how do we seed the video where it belongs, and how do we reach out to people? And that means, to get to your second question, that we also target. Yes, we have money that we can spend on targeting, and we also do a new targeting for every video to reach out to more people. What we also do is that we don't target from the minute we post, but we first wait for some hours, sometimes even days, to see, okay, how does this develop, and now how do we target in order to even make that better effect for video?
Yeah, just to add a little bit of our experience about the Facebook algorithm change, I think for us it hit us pretty hard. Like the first 3 weeks we didn't see any change. We were like, oh wow, okay, so that's fine for us because we usually also have a lot of engagement. And then we really saw the change. Like, we really saw that our videos did not reach the normal audience. We have 72,000 fans on Facebook, I think, now. So we had, I don't know, you posted the video and then it took a very, very long time and you just had reached maybe 5,000 people, which was very odd. And we had a very successful video, and it was about also the Me Too movement, and it was very successful. But we're convinced that before the algorithm change, it would have been like double the success. Like, there would have been, because we had a lot of engagement, but the reach did not scale. I don't know. It was very weird, and yeah, since the change, we're really struggling with it, and we see that something has changed, and yeah, I think the biggest problem is that we have those 72,000 fans, that we put a lot of work into actually having them, and now it's like, I don't know, someone in an article wrote, it's a bit like you have the New York Times, you pay for it, but then you have to pay the paper boy extra to deliver the New York Times. So that's sort of that algorithm change. So we have actually, all of the people have clicked on We Like Jäger und Sammler, but now to reach them, we have to pay extra. So that pisses us off a bit. And we have not yet found a solution for it, actually. Yeah.
I have a short question about your production processes, because I mean, you've showed us some examples from inside a Pflegeheim, and you had this interview with this obviously neo-Nazi group, and you had some images from the Central Republic of Africa. I'm just going to say that. I'm just wondering, you're producing this for YouTube, for Facebook, for Instagram, and so on. So I'm interested in how you produce these things. Do you go out with a huge crew? How difficult is it? How easy is it for you? And also, how dangerous with the examples that you had? And how do people react to that? If you go into a Pflegeheim and say, I'm from the öffentlich-rechtliche Rundfunk, and you start doing the fist and everything with these people, how do they react? And also the example with the neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
Was there a huge security crew behind you, or did you just walk in there with your cell phone and said, can we do an interview, please?
Maybe, Julia, you can start. We've been talking quite a
lot.
lot.
So the way we produce, it's quite, we are usually in small teams. So it's the reporter and host, and then we have a camera guy or girl, and that's it. So we are not a huge team, and sometimes even we just film with our phones. So I was in India the year before last, and I was just filming with my phone because otherwise I would have been even more visible than I was with my blonde hair anyway. So we try to really do it in a small way, so we can sometimes sneak into places. But then again, we do have the standards that the ARD or also ZDF has. So we do just regular inquiries, and we say, hello, we want to come, we want to shoot at your place, and this is what we do. talking about the dangers that we are facing. We are very aware of that. So if we are sending people to war zones, basically, we make sure before they have the proper training and that they are maybe even listed with the German foreign, what's it called?
The one?
So, yeah, the ministry, so that they know that our people are down there. So we really take care of that, because sometimes, yes, it can be dangerous. So we follow basically the same standards that a proper TV production would follow, because otherwise it would just not be responsible.
The home for the elderly was very welcoming.
Yeah, our production process is we do not have large crews. Like usually we have there's a VJ and there's the host, and that is it. But we have different, like not every video that we do has the same production length. Like the video that you've seen, that took a long time, and it was also my colleague who did it. Usually she does not do videos because she's an editor, but that particular video she did it because she worked for Frontal 21 before, so she has like 8 or 10 years of experience doing difficult topics, and they also had a colleague or 2 colleagues from Frontal that came with them. They did not have like a big security backup or anything, but because she had that experience, you know, they prepared right, and of course they did not go into the concert because that would have been, well, irresponsible. You couldn't do that, and so yeah, if we do that kind of difficult topics, of course we prepare it, and yeah, we're also looking, is that person experienced enough to do it? So yeah, that's what my colleague Kio did, and that took a longer time than usual. Like our normal videos, we have 3 weeks to produce them, and it's really just the VJ and the host who do it. It's very light equipment, and sometimes you have an additional cameraman who does it. Yeah.
Maybe I can add one more thing, because you were also asking about the reactions. Actually, they are really positive, especially if we go to those places abroad. Then we get a lot of positive reactions, because it is not something that is very much happening on YouTube so far. Sometimes you have TV reports that are just put on YouTube, but that you actually have a YouTube channel that does it in a way that is fit for YouTube, and that you go to places and do these kind of documentaries. It doesn't happen that much, so people really like that, and they react really positively, and they say it's great that you're going there, thank you so much, we need more of that. On the other hand, a lot of times these topics, they don't have the best number of views. So if you do something about Instagram and influencers, that works much better than if you go to the Central African Republic. But you know what, we don't care too much, because we think it is important, and if we reach our 70,000 people with a Central African Republic video, that's great.
Yeah, well, just to add maybe also about the reactions, we do get quite a lot of hate, our format, our show, and it always depends like on which topics we tackle. In that case, of course, well, actually the first video we did when we went online, that was also about right-wing rap or Nazi rap or both. And we were talking to a rapper from the Identitäre Bewegung. So that video, it went quite viral, so that already attracted, like we were just starting out, and we gained a lot of fans, a lot of positive reactions, but we also gained the interest and the attention of that particular group. And then, of course, when we did that video, we gained the attention of a different group. And then we did, always when we do something about gender, like if it's about sexism, if it's Me Too, if it's about the gender wage gap, we get lots of negative reactions. Like we've been accused of sexism against men, racism against white people, favoring Muslims over Christians. So lots of really weird stuff. And so the reactions, like we now know, but we try to not be influenced by it, that if we go into certain topics that there will be some hostile reactions, but we try not to be influenced by it. Yeah.
Hello. Eva, you mentioned allocating resources. I'm wondering who's in your team and what kind of expertise is in your team?
I have the privilege of having a rather large team. That is also something I maybe want to add to our budgets. We certainly don't have any TV budget just because we're public broadcasting. We don't have the resources of a proper TV show or anything. That is really also something they are redefining, unfortunately. My team consists of Hanne and me, who are heading the rest of the team. Which we are also very proud to have like a female Doppelspitze, we say in German. So also trying to innovate there. Then we have 3 young editors who are doing the topics and preparing and doing the research. We have a community manager who's also responsible for the seeding of the videos. We have our own cutter, because as you could maybe also tell from what I showed, is that we not only do cut together a video, but it's also heavily like working on typography, which is super important on Facebook because so many people watch the videos without sound. So if you put a lot of text on it to just convey what they are about, people just stick there longer. So that's very important. But yeah, that's the core team. Like 5 people on the editorial side, plus a community manager, a cutter, and then camera guys, and additional graphics come from like on demand, so to say.
Hi there. So you're doing something which is extremely innovative and extremely interesting, and I believe we're not really used to see this on other public broadcasters in Europe. And when you were, mentioning the different radios and TVs that are part of it, I didn't see DW, Deutsche Welle. Are you going to innovate and go into international, maybe with DW or even on your own? Is that something that is interesting for Funk?
DW is a very special case within the German public broadcasters because it's the one station that is not aimed at the inner Germany but at the exterior. I just talked to Guido Baumhauer 2 days ago and he was like, oh, I so want to do something for and with Funk. But I think it hasn't been the focus just yet because, we started out 1.5 years ago and our mandate is to reach out to German youth. And I'm not quite sure about what the status is right now on the working with Deutsche Welle, but I think it would be super productive and rewarding to, for example, also translate some of the formats that we do. But I think right now, Flo Hager and Sophie Burkhardt, the bosses of Funk, are not focusing on that, so that would have to come from Deutsche Welle so that they syndicate our content.
Yes, they actually contacted our format, and they want to try to show some of the videos that we do. But it's not so easy. You cannot just take it from one platform and put it to the other. And not all of the things that we do are interesting for an international audience. So yeah, it's not so easy to make that transfer, and Funk is really, it's a piece of work, right? You cannot just, okay, let's copy that. It's really hard. You again.
Hey, me again. I'm interested in your relationship to the TV stations you're connected to. Are they interested in what you're doing? They're, oh wow, what can we learn? Or are you the crazy Facebook, YouTube people there?
Yeah, they are interested. In our case, we partnered up with Frontal 21, so they know that we exist and they know what we are doing, because oftentimes you're doing your stuff and everyone's like, what? They're doing that? I didn't know. It happens because I know ZDF is like a big house. But yeah, they're interested, but I think we could, and that's something we want to work on, to have like a closer connection, because actually we could profit, like both sides can profit from it, because we have, they have immense knowledge when it comes to investigative work. They have sources, they have research, and we've been collaborating on that. And we're also, like on their Facebook page, they're sharing our videos, and if it fits for us, we're sharing theirs, but sometimes it doesn't quite match because they look different and it's a different language. But I think we're working on that to have like a deeper exchange. But I think with the big houses, they're interested, but it's really because we're doing something different, and our production process is very different from the old school TV thing. I think yeah, it takes a bit of time to translate that and to get it back into the houses, but I think that's one of the goals. I think the first 1.5 years were more like to get funk off the ground, to get the shows going, and now I think they're looking for ways to get the knowledge back into the house, or actually to have a closer connection. That's my feeling.
So we feel that they are very much interested and they like what we do, because it is really a journalistic format that we're having with Y Collective. And also there is a little bit of a transfer sometimes, not every week, but sometimes the morning show of ARD, they contact us and they say, this is a nice topic that you're planning, can we have that for our show? And then we have to re-edit that, make it a lot shorter, and usually there is less of personal insight from what the author thinks, because we focus on that quite a bit. And you know, in classic TV you don't do that, you're just the reporter, you stand behind your story. So yeah, we have to re-edit that. But yeah, they are interested in a couple of the topics that we do, so they actually make their way to TV, but it's never the other way around. So we always produce for YouTube. And it's YouTube first, it's Funk first, and then in the next step it can be that the radio station calls us and say, hey, do you want to make a little talk about that, or do it for our TV show, but it's always YouTube first.
It can also be of advantage if the TV guys are not interested in you, because you're kind of flying under the radar, and this gives you a lot more freedom to experiment and just try to innovate. And I've enjoyed that quite a bit over the last years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we jumped ahead a bit with the question section. If there are no more questions right now, we can talk a little bit about our learnings, maybe. But if you have questions in between, just raise your hand and we'll get back to you.
Yes.
Sorry. So, yeah, I thought it would be interesting to look a bit at our video tops and flops, because there are some, at least with us, there were some videos we were really, really proud of, and we thought, hey, that's fantastic, and it's going to work really well, and it didn't. And then others were really surprised that they worked. So yeah, I'm interested in what are your video tops and flops from like a year or a year and a half of work for Funk.
So our most watched video, and not only in clicks, but also in the watch time, so that people actually did watch it longer than a couple of seconds, was something about the Black Bloc at the G20 meetup last year in Hamburg. You probably heard that Hamburg was literally burning. So we made a film before that happened. And our author, he did an amazing job. He really talked to the people in the Black Bloc, what they were organizing and why, and what their motivation was. So our film was ready when Hamburg started to burn. So everybody was going on YouTube, and they were basically looking for pictures of, you know, burning cars and the whole city being struggling. But then they came across our video, which wasn't news, you know, it was done beforehand, but it actually worked because we could give them an insight why that was happening, why these people were acting the way they did. So it was a mix of planning that we did, and then the events that happened that were in our favor. I mean, terrible as it sounds, but it was for our video. And also then the YouTube algorithm played in our favor. That's something that we have to deal with. It's not the Facebook newsfeed that we have to deal with, but what YouTube does. And that's also sometimes, to tell you the truth, it's sometimes a big black box. So why does one video land on the landing page of YouTube? So of course that gets a lot of views, or it's in the trends. Sometimes you can tell, but sometimes you really can't. So sometimes we're just lucky that we are in the trends, and sometimes we don't understand why we're not, because we did all the planning and it was right on the same day, and then it never happened. But yeah, in that for that video it really worked, and we got 1 million views to date, and it's still growing because people are still interested in why are people starting to burn cities for their political views. So yeah, that was our top.
Our top was a video that we did 2 months ago, I think, about the German refugee crisis. It has gained up to date around 4 million views, and again, I don't know, some 50,000 shares maybe. That went through the roof and was also a very, very emotional production for us, because what we did there was we arranged meetings of young refugees from Syria who reached or came to Germany 2-3 years ago with people who fled from Germany in the 1940s, 45, 44. So this intergenerational exchange was just a very, very emotional thing. I still get goosebumps now, because that, to us it was exciting to see that this topic of the refugee crisis is still getting a lot of attention, and people are still interested in it. And this was a video not about the policies around it, but about the emotions and the everyday challenges around it. And then to see that 2 generations get together, talk about their experiences, and come to the conclusion that it's actually pretty much the same, and that those people that come to Germany now are like going through the same challenges and phases and problems that people went through 60 years ago. That just touched many, many people, and that also exploded with this thing, because we didn't only reach our, like this audience, we reached this audience, and then we reached far beyond, because we also went up to, because we depicted different generations in the video. I think it also completely bursted through the 20 to 29-year-olds whom we wanted to reach. It also bursted through language barriers, because of course the refugee community is huge and shared it in their circles and so on, and that was just so beautiful to see. It was also interesting to see there how, when we get a lot of cross-posts from other media who want to share our videos or cross-post them, and then to see how different the discussions are on the different pages. I was very happy that our community manager didn't have to deal, for example, with the cross-post of Tagesschau, because there was all the mob was debating there, and with us it was more people who were sharing the stories of their grandparents, for example. And that was beautiful to see, and our biggest success to date.
Can I just ask, do you see, I mean, you're front and center of your show, but you've done, that video was without you.
Several ones without me.
Yeah. Do you, is there a difference? Like, do you see that in the views? Does it matter if you're there or not?
I think, maybe, yes, actually. I mean, the videos without me are often very successful, and I don't have a problem stating that. Like we did also in our first season, we did a beautiful and funny video about first-time voters who commented on the TV spots of the parties, and that was just fun, and it was a fun way also to convey, okay, how are the different parties campaigning, and it didn't need me for that because I wasn't a first-time voter, so we didn't have me in there, and it also gained like 500,000 views right from the spot. And that was just, to me, it was beautiful to see. I'm not only the host, I also have this team, and we're working on, okay, how do we crack that algorithm? But still, for this approach of taking strong positions, it needs a host, I think, and an identification figure. I'm totally fine if I don't gain the 4 million views with my face. It's
okay. It's interesting because we tried it 2, 3, or 4 times, I don't remember, where we did not have a host and it did not work. Might have been the topic, I don't know, but for us it's really, we figured it's really important to have a face. Maybe it's also because we, our hosts usually take a strong stance like on the topic and everything, and I think if you do a video without a host, it's different, the tone is different, and for us it did not work, so that's...
Well, I think it works if you have people who are who share their experiences. I can't...
Emotional.
Emotional experience. I can't share my experience, luckily, I can't share my experience with having an abortion or with having my name spelled out wrong. I mean, that happens, but if someone calls me Eva, I don't have a problem as if I'm in Germany and someone calls me Väter instead of Vater. And what that does to somebody who says, I'm a German citizen, but people... don't, like, I don't have to be in that video. That's a video about those people, and they should be front and center. And it works.
Yeah, so our top videos, I was looking at a huge Excel data set last week to find out, and actually, it's the first 5 or 6 topics. It's it's right-wing or Nazi, it's police brutality, and lots of gender and sexism. So that really, really works well for us. It's also what gets us lots of comments, lots of critique. Like our community management has a lot to do. Like she's very, very busy. But that works really well for us. That sparks debate. It gets shared a lot. So yeah, that works well for us. What does not work well for us, funnily enough, digital topics. Like if we had something about cookies or tracking, did not work at all. No one was interested. We had something about slow internet, and that was interesting because for us it did not work. You did something on slow internet, and I think it worked pretty well.
Pretty well, yeah.
So there's also then the question, maybe the way we did it was not right, maybe the host was not right. We did something on bots that was actually one without a host, that was just animation, did not work at all. We also did drugs. Drugs do not work for us. I don't know, for everyone else on YouTube, if you do something about drugs, I think you immediately get like 100,000 clicks. Drugs don't work for our community, I don't know why. And sometimes I think it's a combination about the topic and the host. We did have some hosts that we really liked. We thought they were young, they were smart, they were quick on their feet. But they did not work with our specific audience. And we saw that because we have lots of cross-posting partners. For example, ZDF Heute is cross-posting a lot of our videos. Frontal is cross-posting videos. And they have, well, an older audience. And the cross-post did really perform really well. So like overall, we did have great views, but the views were coming from the cross-post and not from our community. So in the end, yeah, we had to look at that too and then say, we really like that host, but it's not working out for us. That was an interesting discovery for us, that some hosts, even they're young, even they're very smart, do not work for us. So it's not always the topic. Sometimes it's also the host. That's what we figured out. Yeah, I don't know. What about you? What were your flops?
It's a bit, we're almost at the end of the session, and now we're talking about flops. That's not so nice.
We can also skip it and go to something else if you do not want to talk about flops.
No, I can, we're done. We're getting a sign that we're done.
Oh, we're already done? Do we not have until 1:15? Okay, so yeah, then we have to wrap it up. Okay, if you want to, you can meet us for coffee or for a spritz. I think the sun is shining. Thank you for coming. Yeah, we're still here for questions. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Ich dachte wirklich, wir hätten bis Viertel nach.
Nee. Ein Viertel, dann haben wir angefangen.
I'm told to not. It's on? Oh, yeah. I can hear myself better even. Right, thank you so much for joining the session. I was told that I'm brave to do this session alone. I think it's really cool to have the space to talk about my project, and I'm really grateful to the festival for giving me this space. So my name is Milena Marin. I work at Amnesty International. I run a project in Amnesty that I'll spend at least half an hour talking to you about, so I'm not going to introduce it now. We have plenty of time to talk about it. I've been at the festival for at least 4 years, and it's one of my favorite events because it's in Perugia, because you have so many amazing people in the room, because you have such amazing conversations. So I'm really grateful to be here again. And thank you for joining the session. So I'm going to talk about how Amnesty International has been using crowdsourcing technologies to work on big data and engage lots amounts of people to do small tasks for us. So yeah, I'll try to keep the presentation brief so that we can hopefully have as much as possible a conversation at the end. I was also told that they are grateful if we leave the room a little bit earlier, not exactly at 1. All right, so why we do these kind of projects? We do it because researchers, scientists, investigators these days face a data overload problem. We have so much information that we could use in our investigations, in our work, in our research, and it's almost impossible to get through all of this ourselves. So I've put here a picture of a pile of documents, but it's a metaphor for all the social media information that is available online, all the videos that are available on YouTube, all the leaks that we see are happening, and investigators and researchers are inundated with data, and it's impossible for us to go through everything and really include it in a meaningful way in our work. So I think all of you might empathize with us. If you did freedom of information requests and received like pile of documents, if you tried to use videos from YouTube, if you tried to use any social media information, you might empathize with this data overload and the feeling that you will never be able to get through all of it. So one solution that we've experimented with in Amnesty, it's microtasking. So microtasking is a type of crowdsourcing where you get a large task, such as analyzing a very large satellite imagery, or processing 3,000 documents, or any large task that can be split into small tasks or micro tasks and distributed to the internet to users that can help you do small things, but really meaningful things that add up to a whole research and data processing project. So I'll go through some examples before going through the process we've used in Amnesty International. You might know La Nación. They've been here a few years. They are not here now. They are an amazing news organization from Argentina. And they have a project called Voz Data. It means your data. So what they are trying to do is to liberate data, create open data sets from data that is closed, that is inaccessible. So one example of projects they had, and they run it every year, is MP expenses, politicians' expenses. You know that often transparency laws require politicians to publish their expenses, and very often these are receipts and documents that are maybe scanned, they are badly scanned, they come in different formats, and it's just impossible to make sense of them. It's impossible to process all these documents to see who spent what, who had the biggest expense in the government. Cumulatively, politicians X, how much they spent compared to politician Y. So you have the pile of documents and you want to transform them into structured data so that you can run analysis, you can understand what's happening in there. So they built this project, Voz Data, where they liberate documents, they engaged people, and just to show you the results, in very short time they managed in 2015 to liberate over 2,000 documents and to cumulatively understand expenses in the value of $34 million. So now, again, from like a pile of documents, they managed to have structured data they can analyze, and they come up with trends. This has also been at times negative for journalists, and especially for advocacy organizations, because once politicians realize that people can do that and they can actually understand the data they open, they closed it. So they say, okay, we're not publishing the expenses anymore. If you can actually understand what they mean, we're not publishing them anymore. Another really cool project that comes from journalism was Madison from the New York Times. I don't know if anybody, the developer of this project used to again come to the festival quite often, so you might know Jackie. This was a project to engage audiences of the New York Times to analyze their historical ads. So you might have heard about the New York Times building an amazing archive and building systems to digitize this archive. So every article, every text they ever published is digitized. So it's available to search, it's available to understand. But one piece of content that was really, really hard to digitize were the ads. It was hard to digitize because ads came in very different formats, very different type fonts, very different illustrations, and it was really hard for them to classify, categorize, and really digitize these ads. So they launched in about 2014, 2015, they launched this project where they asked their audiences to look at the ads and tell them what the ads are about. So they processed ads since the early 20s up until the current days. And now they have like an amazing archive of historical ads that are classified, categorized, and that are actually useful to historians. And another project that I want to quickly tell you about before going into the example is our own project at Amnesty International. So this was a project that we launched in 2016. It was called Decode Darfur. We had evidence that in Darfur, in 2016, villages were still being burned down to the ground. So although many people consider Darfur to be an old conflict of the early 2000s, we demonstrated that it's still an active conflict. Our researchers managed to comb satellite imagery and demonstrate by showing before and after pictures, demonstrating that villages are indeed being burned down to the ground, people are being displaced. And we managed to document with our own researchers quite a lot of villages like this, but we had this suspicion that is happening across the country. So we wanted to process more satellite imagery. We wanted to do not just 3,000 square kilometers that our researchers could do manually. We wanted to see whether we can understand the whole of Darfur, and maybe we can understand the whole of Darfur over time. So we engaged people to help us map Darfur. So we showed them a small piece of satellite imagery, and we asked them to click on the squares where they see villages. And in a second step, we also asked them to tell us whether the villages have been destroyed. So all these projects are really amazing at engaging people. All these projects had tens of thousands of people participating. Decode Darfur alone for Amnesty had 20,000 people, giving us a total of 9,000 hours of contribution. So that is the equivalent of somebody working full-time for 8 years. It's not that we would have taken 8 years to do this work, but that's how much time they gave us. People are extremely dedicated. The minute you give them something that is meaningful and you show them a value, you show them why they should contribute, why it's important to have this data, why is it important to human rights research, people are keen to participate. So that's why I called the session, big data. You can process big data, you can have amazing engagement, and it's valuable for research. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take you through one of our projects, a recent project that we finished, we wrapped up at the beginning of this year. We ran last year and then ran the analysis at the beginning of this year. Because this project has been, has a beginning and an end, I'm going to take you a little bit through the steps we took to set up a project like this. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the most recent project we have, which Sam gave you pieces of paper about. Oh, before that, yeah, that's a framework we use. So basically, using microtasking, using this type of crowdsourcing, we can process any kind of data. We can process pictures, documents, videos, audio, SMS, maps, any kind of data you can imagine, about different types of issues. So these are human rights, very specific human rights issues, but media organizations might have issues that they investigate that are similar to this or different. And then we can engage people to do things like classifying, comparing, counting, digitizing. So this is, if you want, a bit of a framework we developed at the beginning of the projects just to give us a sense of what is possible. And I found that really useful in discussing with researchers. You might find it useful discussing with your colleagues, investigators, into what kind of issue you want to investigate, what kind of data you need, and can you engage a community of volunteers to help you structure that data, organize that data, make it ready for you to analyze, visualize, to include in your reports and in your pieces. So yeah, the project that I want to tell you about was called Decode Oil Spills. So this was a project that was zooming into the Niger Delta in Nigeria. This is one of the most polluted regions of the world. It's extremely rich in oil, and there are lots of companies that are exploiting oil there. As you know, Nigeria is not a rich country, but these companies are having huge profits from exploiting oil on the ground. Every year, there are hundreds of spills in this region. It's a small region and it's affected by spills every single year. Hundreds of spills, destroying the livelihood of people, contaminating their water, their farming. So these people rely on the ground for their livelihoods, and the ground is completely polluted and contaminated. There's companies that have no accountability, they don't clean up the spills, and there's no justice for the victims. So Amnesty has a very long tradition on working on the Niger Delta, and we keep pressuring Shell and Eni and other companies that are working on the ground to do better, to maintain their pipelines better, to secure their pipelines better so that people don't tap into the pipelines to steal oil. So we're doing quite a lot of advocacy work, but we never really had the data. Back in 2014, we managed, through a lot of advocacy and pressure, to get them to publish some of this data. So as a result of our work, and as you know, governments do the same. They give you like some peanuts, they publish some data, but they publish it in a format that is not really accessible. So that's what Shell and Eni did with us. We asked them to be more transparent, to give us more information about the spills. So they published on their website spills. Shell published since 2011 and Eni published since 2014. All the other companies operating in the region are not publishing anything. So we had something to start with. But the data was messy. So there was this website, and we could download pictures of the spills and investigation reports. The investigation reports are scanned PDFs. They are filled in by hand, scanned and uploaded on the website. If you worked with data, you know that's your nightmare. That's something you can't use. So I'll tell you the story on how we went from piles of documents like this and pictures of oil spills like this into a structured data set like this. So nightmare, nightmare, dream. So the first thing that we wanted to do, so knowing that we want to engage people to help us liberate data from these documents, the first thing we wanted to do was define the task. What is that we want people to do for us? We want people to read these documents. What information do we want them to extract from the documents? These are 9 pages long documents, very, very, very dense in information. So we needed to, obviously, we can't overwhelm people. Like if you want to do engagement, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to participate. So you can't overwhelm people. You can't tell them, read 9 pages and transcribe every single word on this page. You have to give them an easy way to participate. So I did quite a lot of workshops with our researchers to get them to really narrow down what is the most valuable information in these spills. And not just what is their instinct, what they think could be useful, because we all have instincts, like we think that could be useful, but really asking them, no, but how are you going to use this data? So imagine you have the data, what are you going to do with it? So that's how, through several workshops, we managed to narrow down to the most valuable bits of information in the document. And these were around the cause of the spill, It was important. The cause of an oil spill is important because if it's a company's fault, if it's an operational spill, then companies are not just required to clean up the spill, but they are required to compensate local communities for that. So because the fault sits with them, they have to compensate local communities. And sometimes local communities have been compensated in the order of billions of dollars. And that is as well results of organizations like Amnesty pushing and advocating and going to court with these companies to make them compensate communities. So cause is important because it could result in compensation. Location of the spill was important because we needed to know what are the hotspots of these spills. Are there communities that are constantly affected by spills? Where we can maybe point to negligence. Companies would know that this is a hotspot, it happens all the time, and they are not securing the pipelines, they are not maintaining the pipelines, right? So again, was important. Then we focused as well on analyzing the pictures. So not just extracting information from the documents, but also corroborating that with the pictures on site. And we found that very often pictures were not telling anything. Like often, the pictures should be at least of the pipeline that caused the spill. But often there were like wide shots of the forest, of the groves. It was like just beautiful pictures, you know, but had nothing to do with the spill. So based on this analysis, what we could do is identify spills that we are asking now the government to investigate again. So defining the task was important. Making the tasks really easy for people to participate was important. So what we ended up having were 3 little projects. So we looked at the cause. We called it Little Project Decode the cause, Little Project Decode the location, and Little Project Decode the image. So we didn't ask people. It was really simple. You opened the document. We highlighted for you the area you need to look at, and a very simple question. Can you extract the cause? Can you extract the location of the spill? So yeah, that was the work around defining the methodology. Now that we knew what we needed to do, we had to go get the data from the company website, right? So I told you they published the PDFs and the images on their websites. So we had to go scrape all this data. Now, super important, before you go scrape data, check the terms and conditions, right? Guess what the terms and conditions of Shell said? That we can only print 1 single copy of documents or look at it on the screen, that we cannot download any pieces of information in bulk from their websites. So what do you do in these kind of cases? Obviously, you want that data, but the company very specifically tells you that you can't do it, and they have terms and conditions that don't allow you to do that. So luckily in Amnesty, we have a legal team, and we went with this to the legal team, and it's like, okay, what do we do now? We really want this document. We want to get them all in bulk, downloaded from their website. We don't want to rely on the fact that they will keep these documents online and that they will be kept exactly in the same way, especially while the project is running, right? So we want, yeah, our lawyers luckily were amazing and told us that these documents are public interest documents and actually do not belong to Shell because they are the result of an investigation that is a joint investigation with community members, with local governments, with other organizations on the ground. So they do not belong to a single organization, so they cannot actually have these terms and conditions on their website. And if they sue us, good for them. Really good media coverage for us. So we decided to go ahead, get all the data from it, archive it. We could have used their own server, document server for our platform, and it could have been good because we would have sent lots of traffic all of a sudden to these documents. So, you know, nobody ever looks at these documents on their website, and all of a sudden you have tens of thousands of requests to view the documents. And we thought that could have been a pretty cool campaigning against Shell and Eni. But we also didn't want to rely on them turning off the tap. You know, they could have said, Amnesty is looking at these documents, you know what, let's take them down for a month and then we'll put them back up when they finish their campaign. So we obviously, took them down, archived them, and then we had to go through a process of, pre-processing the data, just understanding how these documents are. And guess what? Shell and Eni were really keen to make people's lives really hard in analyzing the documents. So we had to do a little bit of a pre-project with a small amount of volunteers to see how these templates vary over time. And we saw that every year, year and a half, they would completely change the order of the questions on their questionnaire, on their forms. They would completely change the format. They would sometimes change the questions altogether. So yeah, we did this analysis where we analyzed, we saw that each company, each shell and any had like almost 10 to 12 templates. So they were changing constantly. I don't know if they did it on purpose. But we had to go through this pre-processing exercise. And that would happen on any kind of project. You can't just put data out there. You have to clean it. You have to understand it. You have to understand, again, like what is the task and so on. All right, the third step. So you got your questions. You got your data. Now you have to build the tool. So we had a whole platform. It sits on decoders.amnesty.org. A whole platform that, you know, has these documents. Each document is what we call an asset. So each document has some tasks attached to it. Now we want to extract the location, we want to extract the cause, we want to analyze the image. So these tasks have to be served to people that request us. So volunteers come on the platform, they log in and say, okay, I'm ready to contribute. So then we have to give them one of these tasks. We have to record their answer and then give them another one if they are willing to contribute more. So it's not straightforward. There's lots of available tools out there that are open source that you can use, but it's not straightforward. So we needed a team. Our team consisted of developers, designers, data scientists, and we also worked within Amnesty with researchers, with communications experts that can promote the project and so on. So yeah, super important to have a team working on this. I've seen projects like this with very small teams, but they weren't very impactful. So if you have a proper team, then you can have really good impact. Then you choose the tech stack. I'll take you through some options of technologies you could use. And my very strong advice is to invest in user experience. And again, I've seen lots of projects like this, and the best ones are the ones that have a very strong focus on user experience and design. When we launched the projects, every time we launch a project, the #1 comment we get is, it's so pretty. It looks so good. So if it looks good and people have a smooth experience, those are the only comments you'll hear, and that's what you want. You don't want to hear like, it's buggy, it doesn't work, I don't understand how to contribute, I don't understand why I need to contribute. So really investing in user experience, and for any projects, it's mega important. For any projects that involve having people looking at your project, super important to invest in UX. So these are some tools you could use. We published a research on microtasking. So if you Google microtasking, you'll probably have this research popping up for you. So we take you there through some tools. The tool we used initially was this tool called Pybossa, which is like probably the easiest to use tool. It's open source. It also comes with a company that provides services around it. So you can either, if you have techies in your company, you can install it and you can run it in-house. Or if you have a bit of budget, you can pay this organization called SciFabric to do it for you. We moved away from that because it didn't scale enough for us. We're now using a tool called Hive that was developed by the New York Times for this project Madison that I talked to you about at the beginning. This is also open source, also available online, really easy to use. So it really depends what you want to do. You have to ask yourself some questions. You know, how do you want your platform to react? For example, you might want to decide whether you want anonymous users or not. We had anonymous users in all our projects until this one that we're running now, which is called Troll Patrol. We're not allowing anonymous users because we're afraid that we'll be trolled on a project called Troll Patrol, right? We're inviting it. So you have to decide that. You have to decide, you know, what kind of data formats you want to have, which language you want to host it in. Do you want it to be mobile responsive or not? So several tools allow you to do several things. So you have to go through that and decide which tech stack you want to use. All right, then the next step, so you got your data, you got your questions, you got your tool built, you need to launch and engage users. Now, obviously, traffic on the website is directly proportional with the promotion you're running. So the more promotion you're running, the more people visit your website, the more people contribute. We've experimented with emails, ads, social media. It's really good for us to have media coverage, working with partners, working with universities. So try to promote your project as wildly as possible so that people know about it and they contribute. Then in terms of engagement, one thing that we've done and had really amazing results and was completely unexpected was to attach a discussion forum. So while people were doing tasks, we allowed them to discuss these tasks with others. So if you had a doubt or if you want to flag something important, so for example, in the satellite images, people wanted to tell us, hey, really look at this satellite image, I'm seeing a fire, or look at this satellite image, I think I'm seeing a refugee camp, or I think I'm seeing like a secret military base in this one. So they wanted to talk to us, they wanted to tell us some interesting details they found, and we gave them that option by embedding a forum into our platform. Again, there we're using an open source tool called Discourse. It's really good, can't recommend it enough. But that also means that, yeah, we have direct real-time feedback from people. Like, if something is broken, they tell us in 1 minute that we fix it the other. They give us also amazing feedback in terms of, you know, how they feel they can actually contribute to something. And it's just really good to be there with users while they are using your tool and get that depth of engagement with them. The 99.1% model, it's a kind of average model of engagement. So 90% of your users will do few tasks, let's say 5 to 10 tasks. So nobody does just one, people keep going, but you know, most of the users will do a little bit. 1% will do quite a lot, so you'll have those super engaged users. You always have those. They're amazing. They are so passionate. They are so with you. They believe in you so much that they will be there with you. For example, this 1% we engage in moderating the forum. We ask them to join us, to answer questions. They get to talk a little bit more with our researchers. We mentor them. And we really make use of their passion and of their engagement to help us work with others. And those 9% are people that do quite a lot, that come back. So yeah, this is a sort of engagement, a model you can use to calculate, you know, how many tasks or how many documents can I liberate with an audience that will be this big. And then finally, gamification works. We've experimented with different models, so showing people how much they've done, how much the whole community has contributed, showing them progress, how much more you have to do. This works really well, and what I love about our audience was that they were not motivated that much about the personal gamification features, so like, you've done this many tasks, but they were more interested to see, as a community, how much they do. So they are really, really community-driven, our users, which is amazing. I think we're very lucky. Right, finally, verify, analyze, and publish. So after your engagement, and typically projects run for about a month, on an average. Sometimes they can run quicker, sometimes you need more time to get through all the tasks, but that's the average. When you get all the contribution back, what you need to do is verify this contribution. So a single task, like a single document in our case, was seen by multiple people. And we had as well experts contributing. So what we had to do was to see to what extent the community agrees on a certain question, to what extent the community agrees with experts on a certain question. So we have to run some statistical models to understand that. And sometimes there are questions that people don't agree, and we might have to put those to experts, or we might have to leave that data on the side and only use the one that we can verify. So this is what we published at the end of the project. We published a report that we called Negligence in the Niger Delta. So we could point to negligence on behalf of these companies. We could point to a number of spills that we asked for them to be investigated, where we didn't think that the companies provided enough information about the cause of the spills. And we think they said these spills are the cause of the fault of the community. So the community sometimes taps into the pipelines and steals oil. So these companies say that most of the spills are that reason. So poor them, they are doing everything they can, but these wild Africans are tapping into their pipelines and stealing their oil. But we could point to specific cases where we think they didn't provide information to support their claims, and where we think it was their fault and they were trying to blame communities. So now these spills are being reinvestigated. Obviously, we mapped the spills, we did really cool visualizations, and we engage, we produce different outputs for different audiences. The report is an advocacy report, and we use it to pressure Shell, to pressure the companies, to pressure the government. We did a story page with like nice visualizations from for people who contributed and for people who are interested in the project. We did GIFs for the social media audience and so on. So we're trying to package information in different ways for different audiences. So yeah, that's it about this project. And now we're running, right now, we're running this project called Troll Patrol, which is around online violence against women. We produced a report, a 16-month research into online violence against women. We interviewed women, journalists, politicians, activists, who are using Twitter to express their opinions, to talk about their work, and who are silenced by people who abuse them with sexist remarks, with racist remarks, and often with death threats, rape threats. And we're telling companies that companies, especially Twitter, that they are not doing enough to stop this abuse and to protect women and to protect their freedom of expression. But they don't care that much. And they don't share with us any information about the number of reports they get, about their action. So they don't really share that with us. And what we wanted to do is demonstrate the scale of abuse. So we launched this project where we're trying to analyze 500,000 tweets, which are a representative sample of tweets that have been sent to women politicians and journalists from the UK in the past year. And we're trying to see the scale of abuse they receive, the type of abuse they receive. We're trying to see who are the perpetrators. We're trying to see whether we can do something to stop this. And we're trying to use the data to pressure Twitter. We're also trying to see whether we can develop a little machine learning algorithm based on this data to have live analysis of tweets and understand abuse like that. So we're just asking people to read one tweet and answer a super quick question. Can you read the tweet and tell us whether the content is problematic or abusive? We distinguish between content that is problematic, maybe swear words, maybe insults, and content that is abusive, that targets one's personality, individuality. We've seen that women are abused. The more they have intersectional identities, the more they are abused. So if you are a transgender woman of color, then you get a lot of abuse, more so than white women. So yeah, that's the project we're running now. You have posters of the project. Please do share with your friends, get them to participate. The more people we have, the better it is. The more people that care about online abuse that participate, obviously, the better it is. Because again, like, one of the risks we identified with this project is being trolled by men's rights activists. I don't know, Russian trolls. So we want genuinely interested people to participate so that we can have a really good project. So that's it from my end. I want you guys to have my contact details. Please get in touch. Let me know if you have any questions. And I think we have about 20 minutes for questions from you guys. Yeah? Karina. There you go.
Thank you, Milena. This is really fascinating. Thank you for the presentation. I'm inspired. I was wondering whether when you scraped the data from Eni and Shell, did you hide your IP just to protect the identity of the scraper in case they would be alerted? Thanks.
That's a really good idea. No, we haven't done that. And the reason we haven't done that is we had a really bad developer working with us at the time. Otherwise, it's a really good idea, and we should have been really careful at the time of collecting the data, because then obviously we made quite a lot of noise around it, around the project, around the campaign, and we wanted Shell to know that it's us doing this. But while you're preparing a project, while you're working on it, you want to keep your cards close to your chest. So that would have been a really good idea. But
I'm saying that because one of the media outlets I'm currently working for was pretty much. We had our IP banned by North Korean government.
Of course you had. Yeah? Do you want to introduce yourself? Sorry, I knew Karina and I was like, just call her by her name, but it would be good to know your names.
Yeah, sure. My name is Maika.
Yeah?
I'm a student and also working for a newspaper in Holland.
Yeah.
And we're just recently tapping into, data journalism, investigating. And do you have any advice on educating the people in the newsroom who are not familiar with data to put some money in it because you can do amazing things, and how can you make them aware of what data can do? How do you make them spend the money? Yeah.
Well, fundraising is obviously the hardest part, and you have to have projects that are worth investing. So I don't think you can ask people for money for broadly data journalism, but if you can think of projects you want to run, like important projects that add social value that you want to run, and you can articulate those projects in proposals, and maybe crowdfunding campaigns or anything like this, but you have to have a very strong value proposition. When you go asking for money, you have to win their hearts before asking them to open up the wallet. So it's obviously a complex thing to do, and I don't work in journalism, so I don't know who are the donors. But you might also want to experiment with, like, yeah, I think crowdfunding could be a good option. And if you do have an important story you want to break, I think people will be behind that. Any other questions? Sam, you had a question as well, right?
Yeah, I'm Sam from Amnesty.
Can you use the mic?
Sorry. I was interested about the advice you might have for smaller organizations, especially around the legal help. So Amnesty was able to go to the lawyers and say, who were then able to say, you know, these terms and conditions are rubbish, you can just ignore them. I think for smaller organizations that's really hard, and the terms and conditions are phenomenally daunting. So what advice would you have for smaller organizations trying to do things like that?
Well, I worked as well in small organizations, and it's really hard. I have to say, working for Amnesty International is amazing because you have so many resources. You have people that are dedicated to the social media, people that do legal advice, people that do communications, people that do research. So you have all these resources you can go to and ask them to work with you, which you don't have in a small organization. So it's much harder. You have to be a really multi-talented person working on everything at the same time. But I do think what is important is to build your network. You know, you're here at the Journalism Festival, you meet a lot of people, and you keep in touch with them, and then when you need help, you have your person, you have your go-to person, you know, you pick up the phone and say, hey, you're a lawyer, I have this problem, what do you advise me? And also there's lots of legal firms that provide free legal advice, but I think what's important is for you to know you need that legal advice. So to know that you read the terms and conditions, and you don't have to maybe listen to everything they say. You might be able to contest them. So I think it's not getting the legal advice that is hard, but it's knowing you need the legal advice, and knowing that that shouldn't stop you. That you can still maybe go ahead if you have somebody advising you. So I think that's the more important thing. Please.
You mentioned free legal advice organizations. There's one, Thomson Reuters Foundation has a branch. It's called Trust Law, and they usually go around the world and they source from lawyers a free number of hours of legal advice for NGOs. As long as you're an NGO, not a person, you might be able to knock at their door and volunteer their support.
There you go. Thank you, Karina. Anybody else, any questions? Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering if you've ever considered offering anything to people for their participation, or if you really just focus on the personal value people get from contributing.
So there's models in the business world. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Mechanical Turk. So this is a professional microtasking platform set up by Amazon as a service for businesses. So if as a business you want, so there's apps, for example, I don't know if you ever used Expensify or apps that process your receipts. So you might think that there's some magic artificial intelligence behind those. You take a picture of them, and in 5 minutes you have everything, you know, all the fields recognized, the value, the currency, the shop, and whatever. Well, that is not fancy machine learning. That is Mechanical Turk. It's people from India, very likely, that are looking at that receipts and filling in a form saying it's a receipt for $12 from this coffee shop, from whatever. So companies can buy services like this. So there are micro workers around the world, people that, you know, live with salaries from this kind of companies, and they are paid few cents per task. Obviously, that's not a viable model for us, and it's not something that we would do because the engagement part as a campaigning and advocacy organization, the engaging part is invaluable for us. We want people to participate because they care, and we want people that are interested in human rights and maybe are a bit tired of signing petitions or liking us on Facebook and want to do something more meaningful. That's what we're giving them, an option to do something more meaningful, to work directly with our researchers and to contribute to a report we launch and contribute to a research piece and really expose as well our methodology, expose the evidence we use, and they find it fascinating. They don't want more, but what they do want is recognition. So we work with them on the forum, we thank them, we answer the questions. So you can't just ask people to contribute and let them be. You have to be there with them while they do the project, and especially if they have questions, you have to answer those. So I think that's what we offer people. Any other question? Yeah? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Atika from the UN University. Thanks for the great presentation.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, in terms of engagement, is there a specific target audience that you're looking at, or are you really just trying to engage the general public? Because,
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, at the UN University, we're basically a network of hundreds of researchers and academics serving the UN, and we also have an advocacy part, an advocacy element that I think needs to be awakened a bit more, and it would be great to see such a collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I mean, obviously, if you have a network of people already that you can engage, these projects are amazing. It's quite hard to cast a wide net and have people participating. So for each project, we do audience analysis and we build our personas, who is the person that we want to participate in this project. With the Troll Patrol project we launch now, we're trying to talk to feminist groups, to women's rights groups, obviously people that know the problem and want somebody to do something about it and are really willing to contribute. So that's a very specific type of project that has a very specific kind of audience. But otherwise, so Amnesty has sections around the world, so we are also a network of organizations. And through our sections, we reach out to people from all over the world. Our audience is global, and our audience is amazingly diverse. We have a 12-year-old that I'm trying to get to stay away from the Twitter project, through to people in their 80s. We have, and in particular, it goes really well with older people because they are retired, they are home, they are passionate, they are the people that actually care about human rights, and have a lot of time on their hand, and they are super happy to participate. We had people with disabilities that couldn't leave their homes, that were extremely grateful that we're doing this project that they can do from home, and they can feel like valuable and they feel like they participate. And on that forum, nobody knows they have a disability and they are treated equally like everybody else. We were advised to reach out to people on an autistic spectrum, for example, because they would be like really keen to do lots of tasks, one after the other. We are working with students as well. So really, we have such a diverse audience, but it is important for every project to do think about the personas, to do think about, is there a specific audience that I really need to reach out with this project? And where do they hang out? Where can I find them? How can I tell them this project is happening? Thanks. A couple more questions in the back. Sorry, you're seeing beautiful Natural History Museum.
Hello, I'm Claudio. I was just curious on the gamification process and the fact that you say the community were getting a feedback rather than a personal one. How has been engineered and how it works?
The gamification?
Yes.
So it's connected with our microtasking platform. So the microtasking platform has a long list of tasks that we need to distribute to people. Each task has to go to more people, and each task can't be done twice by the same person. So that's the kind of basic logic of the microtasking philosophy. So this is a database that holds information about how many tasks have been done, how many times, by how many people. So we just have to query this database to pull out progress. So progress would be, it's one type of progress, how many tasks have you done? How many tasks has the whole community done? What is the progress of the project? How many tasks do you still have to do? How many people are participating in total from how many countries? So metrics like this really engage people. So as you do tasks, we would tell you how many you've done and how much more we need to go. So this kind of gamification features we use, and again, we experimented with different things, and because we have access to users on the forum, we could ask them as well. We could get really direct live feedback, so we understood what works best, what doesn't. So putting too much of an emphasis on personal achievement with these kind of projects that are so socially driven is not a good idea. Also, we've made mistakes with gamification. We had a project where we asked people to read urgent action campaign materials, which were talking about people in danger. So, you know, it would be like somebody's about to be imprisoned, or somebody is in prison, help us save them, or somebody is on death row, help us save them, and so on. So some of these documents were talking about people having been executed. And we had this pop-up. Every time somebody did it to us, it was like, great work, well done. And like they were reading death penalty cases and were like, great work. So we got feedback that that's not okay. And we stopped it. So you can overdo it as well with gamification, I can say. There were some more questions in the back, right?
Sophia here. Just connected to the previous question, how much of your audience that participates in the project is actually from, let's say, the underdeveloped world countries? And how much is it actually from the developed world in percentage more?
I don't think we run any percentages, but we have lots of people from the developing countries because most of the projects we've done, so Darfur, Nigeria, we tried to get people, locals, that can help us. And we have, again, because Amnesty is internationally spread, we have reach to people from all over the world, which is amazing. So on the Niger Delta project, we had so many Nigerians contributing. And it was amazing because they could answer questions we couldn't answer because they were living there on the ground, and they could tell us about their experience living in such a polluted area. And they could encourage people to participate more with their testimony, with saying, yes, it's true. Yes, it's true, we cannot fish anymore in our village. And we have signs saying we can't fish, we can't bathe, we can't use natural resources around us because they are polluted. And that motivated people to participate. So we do have quite a big audience. There's some challenges in terms of connectivity. So some of the projects are image heavy and they are slower on low bandwidth connectivity. We're trying to make the projects all mobile responsive, available on mobile, because half of our audiences use mobile, and in the developing world more so. So we're trying to kind of engineer it as well in a way that works for everybody, but we're also actively reaching out to audiences in the Global South. Yep.
Hi, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the verification process. Yeah, just in general. You mentioned really briefly that you have some algorithms running or something, but could you tell us a bit more? Yeah, sure.
So, as I said, every task is done multiple times. To understand how many times a task has to be done before being verified, because it's very different from project to project. You need relatively lower number of contributions on very objective tasks, such as read this document and tell me the date that is written there, or like tell me the cause that is written there. So this is a very simple task, and you have very low errors, unless you are being trolled or something, but we haven't been on that project. So what we do, we run small tests before running projects to understand how many times the tasks need to be run, how many opinions we need around it. And then we also have, while the project is live, we have experts contributing so that we can assess not just how people agree with each other in the crowd, but also how they agree with our experts. And we use algorithms that are called intercoder reliability, so that comes from statistics and from research. Every time you have multiple people contributing around the same thing, you want to run basically algorithms that tell you to what extent people agree. So you end up having a percentage of certainty. Now, we do as well lots of manual verification. Like once we have the data, you can just go through it and see randomly whether it works or not. And some projects are more visual than others. Like the Darfur one, we could map all the contributions on a map, and we could literally go through the map and see the accuracy, as I said, randomly. Like this one with the oil spills was a bit more complex. You had to open sometimes documents and see whether they match the contributions. But we have really good accuracy rates. We had so far. I'm a bit scared about the Troll Patrol project because it's a bit more subjective the way people interpret problematic and abusive content can vary. But so far we had 80 to 90% accuracy on projects. So that means there's a bit of data that we might not be able to use, or we need the experts again to look at it. But overall we had really good accuracy rates. All right. I think unless you guys have another question, yeah, there's an, okay, cool.
Okay. Hi, my name is Camilo, I'm a data journalist. I just wanted to know, for your experiences, you already have done several of these projects, what are like the most common mistakes or pitfalls that you can make when you are starting for the first time in a project like this?
To do a project like this? The hardest thing is to find right developers. It's really having the right team, working with the right people. It's like if you have the right people to work with, you know, any mistake is easily fixed. You know, we experimented with different things. I mean, you might say we've made mistake. We say that we experimented because we wanted to see how is this tool reacting. For example, when we used this tool called Pybosa, it was quite slow and it didn't scale. We had a project that was really popular, Decodar 4. On that project alone, we had over 1.2 million contributions. And they were happening in a very short amount of time, in like 2 weeks. So we had so much traffic and so many people requesting tasks that we weren't fast enough distributing the tasks, and some bits of the tools were like broken because we had so many requests on the database. So this was a problem, and it's a problem that might happen to other people, but you know, you can fix it if you have the right people to help you choose another technology stack and to work around that. But we had as well problems really picking the wrong people, picking developers that are maybe good developers but don't understand anything about social change. They are not interested in your project. They are not listening to what you really need, and they are doing you know, whatever they want. So I think that is, in my experience, the hardest bit. Obviously, you need a budget and you need a team. You can do it on a shoestring, but it's harder. And as I said, like if you are to invest in something as well, invest in UX and have like a good experience for users. All right, one last question and then we have to wrap. Go for it. Do you want me to put up again the email? Yeah, there you go. Can you put up the presentation again? Right, email is here. Yep.
Hello, hi. Karen Fleeting from Trinity Mirror. I wondered, firstly, like how you measure the impact from these campaigns, and secondly, how you or do you sort of feed that back to the people who participated? Like, are they on a mailing list, or how do you stay in touch with them after they've contributed?
Yeah, of course. So the most important impact measurement is whether you have your data analyzed at the end and whether that's good enough for research. Because that was our goal to start with, was to engage people so that we have like really good data, compelling data that we can use in our evidence-based advocacy and research. So if we get that at the end, that's already a great success. Obviously, numbers of people engaged, the amount of time they spend on site. So in Decodar 4, we had like amazing over 10 minutes on site per person. That never happens in journalism. If you guys work with analytics, it's really hard to get people to look at your page for 10 minutes. You know, the number of tasks they do, the degree to which they are engaged with you, the feedback we receive from the forums, all these help us understand whether we were successful or not. And in terms of communicating with them, yeah, that's really important in the engagement process. So we want to close that engagement loop and tell them at the end what we've done with their contributions. So we have 3 different types of feedback. So there's immediate feedback. We close a project, we put up stats. We've processed this many documents in this much time by this many people that dedicated this many hours doing this project. So we have like immediate stats that we can put up right after closing a project. Then we have the medium term, you know, when we might produce a report and we tell them, hey guys, we just produced a report and we, you know, that was based on your work, so such as the Niger Delta report that we put up. And then there's the long term, which is human rights impact, which is really hard to achieve. So if we do manage to get Shell to really clean up every single spill they do, then we'll let people know, but it's hard. And it doesn't depend on a single project. We email people back if they allow us to email them back. As you know, there's consent issues. So they register on the platform and we ask them, do you want us to email you? If they do, we email them. If they don't, we can't. But we would put updates on the platform. We would put updates on social media, so hopefully people still hear about it. I think they are telling me to wrap. I want to thank you all for participating and for the amazing questions.